The hut you are going to sleep in tonight does not exist yet. 10 weeks from now, 12 men will crowd inside it. Out of the worst winter of their lives, there will be a fire in a clay chimney, and wet wool steaming on a pay, and a boy of 16 talking in his sleep, and a war outside the door that is quietly starving to death. But tonight, in the first days of December, 17727, the hut is still 7 oak trees standing on a Pennsylvania hillside, holding their last brown leaves in the wind. And nobody has ever heard the name Valley Forge. 20 miles away, the capital of the United States belongs to the enemy. The army that was supposed to defend it is limping up a frozen road with its shoes falling apart. 11,000 men and no place to spend the winter. And the plan, when they finally hear the plan, sounds like something close to madness. There will be no town to shelter them. There will be no barracks waiting. They are going to march onto a bare hillside and build a city with their own hands, out of standing timber, in the snow, before the cold can finish them. Whether they can do it, and what it will cost, and what will walk out of that city in the spring. That is the story I have for you tonight, friend. So settle in deep and get the blankets right. We have a long winter to keep, you and I, and we are going to keep it warm. It begins with the trees. If you had stood on that hillside on the 18th of December, 17727, you would have heard the army before you saw it. It came up the road from the Gulf in the falling dark, and the sound it made was wrong for an army. There was no drum. There was hardly any talk. What there was, mile after mile of it, was the shuffle and suck of thousands of feet coming down in half-frozen mud, and the creak of wagons with nothing much in them. And here and there, a man coughing the way a man coughs when the cough has moved in to stay. 11,000 soldiers, more or less, and behind them and among them several hundred women and children who belonged to the army the way the wagons did. All of them 3 months out from the last good week any of them could remember. They had reason to be quiet. In September they had stood up to the British at a creek called Brandywine and been beaten. In October they had attacked at Germantown, come within a whisper of winning, and been beaten again. Philadelphia, the largest city in America, the city where the Declaration was signed, was gone, occupied, and the Congress that signed it had packed its papers and run west to York. Now, the year was dying, and the army had been marched and countermarched around the countryside until the shoes came off its feet. And the question every man in that column was privately asking was the question nobody asked out loud. Where are we going to live? The answer was under their boots, and it did not look like an answer. A high rolling stretch of farmland and timber above the Schuylkill River. A forge on a little creek that gave the place its name. A couple of stone farmhouses. Some fields picked clean by 2 armies in turn. Wind from the northwest with nothing to slow it down. And the general who had chosen it, a tall Virginian riding the lines in the cold with his collar up, had chosen it for reasons a farmer could respect. High ground that an enemy would bleed to climb. A river at its back, close enough to Philadelphia to watch the British and crowd them away from the farm country. and far enough that they could not fall on the camp in a single night's march. It was a strong place to defend, and a miserable place to be. And both of those things were true at once. And Washington knew both when he chose it. That first night, the army slept where it stopped. In tents, in wagons, under wagons, in whatever a man could arrange between the ground and the sky. And the wind came across the hills and found every one of them. And the next morning the order went out through the brigades. And it is worth hearing the shape of it, because I do not know of another order quite like it in the history of American arms. Build. The army would house itself. Every squad of 12 men would raise its own hut of logs, 14 feet by 16 feet. The walls 6.5 feet high. The gaps stopped with clay. A fireplace at one end, and a door of split boards at the other. The whole of it laid out in streets, by regiment and brigade like a proper city, because that is what it was going to be. And to put some fire under frozen men. The general offered a prize, $12 to the squad in each regiment that finished its hut first, and finished it well. $12 in a camp where a private's pay was $6 a month, and months behind at that. So the axes came out. And for the next 3 weeks that hillside rang like 1,000 smithies. Stand with me up on the high ground and listen to it, friend, because there has never been a sound quite like it since. Oak and walnut and hickory coming down all along the slopes, the crack and rush and floor-shaking thump of the trunks, and then the steady bite of the trimming axes, and men in worn-out coats hauling logs through the snow on their shoulders because the horses were too few and too weak, and the calling and counting of squads notching the corners up, log on log, all day and into the dark. Thousands of men building at once. Some squads had tools, and some had almost none. And a good axe got passed from hand to hand around the clock, and never once got cold. They floored the huts with split logs, or they floored them with packed earth. They roofed them with boards where boards could be found, and where boards could not be found, they roofed them with saplings and sod, and prayed the rain would be merciful. And the general offered a second prize, $100 for any man who could invent a better roof than the sad ones they had, which tells you everything about the roofs. And the hut we care about, yours, went up in those same weeks, on a company street in a Connecticut brigade, out of 7 oaks that had stood together on the hillside just above. 12 men built it, and they argued over the door and the chimney the way 12 men will, and they chinked the walls with clay dug from the creek bank and carried up in a kettle, pressing it into the gaps with cold red fingers, working it smooth the way you would frost a cake. If the cake were the size of a room and your family's life depended on the frosting, the chimney they built of logs too, and lined it thick with that same clay so it would not catch fire, or would at least think twice about it. They laid up bunks along the walls in 2 tiers, planks and poles and straw where straw existed, and on some gray afternoon, just past the new year, one of them pressed the last handful of clay into the last gap by the door and scraped it level with his thumb, and stood back. And the hut was done. By the middle of January, there were somewhere near 1,500 huts standing on that ground where in November there had been nothing but timber and wind. Streets of them, whole neighborhoods of them. smoke rising from hundreds upon hundreds of clay chimneys into the winter sky. Men who saw it wrote home that a city had appeared on the hills of Pennsylvania, and they were right. And it had gone up faster than any city on this continent ever has, before or since, built by starving men with axes in the dead of winter. For one winter, that city of huts held more people than Boston. But a hut is a strange kind of victory, friend, and the men inside them knew it best. 4 log walls and a clay chimney will keep the wind off you. They will hold the heat of a fire close around 12 tired bodies. What they will do nothing about is an empty kettle, or a worn-through shoe, or the cough 2 bunks down. And all 3 of those were already inside the walls before the clay was dry. The hut was finished. Whether it was a shelter or a trap, the rest of the winter would decide. Now come forward with me, past the new year, past January, into the middle of February, 1778, because this is where you come into it. You are a private soldier in a Connecticut regiment, 22 years old, and this afternoon you are standing in the snow on a company street, in the city of huts with everything you own on your back, 1 blanket, rolled and tied, a haversack with a tin cup, a spoon, a razor you have not used in a week, and a letter from your mother that you know by heart, a musket and a cartridge box. That is the whole inventory. Friend, that is a soldier's estate in the 4th year of the war. You are standing in front of a hut door because the army has moved you. The hut you wintered in up till now has been broken up, its men scattered to fill the gaps in other squads, because sickness has been quietly rearranging this camp for 2 months, the way a tide rearranges a beach. And the paper in the sergeant's hand this morning had your name on it and a company street on it. And here you are at the end of the light, snow coming down wet and heavy, looking at a split-board door with a leather hinge. And behind that door are 11 men you have never met. And this is home now. You know one thing about this hut, because the sergeant told you on the way. You are taking a sick man's place. His name is Amos, a farmer from up by Litchfield. And 4 days ago, they carried him out of this hut on a blanket to the hospital hut at the end of the brigade. And his bunk is the bunk you will sleep in tonight. You have been a soldier long enough to know better than to think about that too hard. And you are human enough that you are thinking about it anyway. You knock, because you were raised to, and somebody inside says, "Come ahead," and you duck through the low door, and the hut takes you in. The first thing is the smell, and I will be honest with you about it, because this story deals honestly or it deals not at all. Wood smoke, first and thickest. Smoke that has soaked into the logs and the blankets and the men, until it is less a smell than a fact of the world. Under that, wet wool drying, which smells like a sheep standing too close to a fire. Under that, 12 men in one room through a long winter, and none of them has had a proper wash since the creek froze. And under all of it, faint and steady, the cold mineral smell of the clay in the walls. It is a lot. That first breath. By tomorrow, you will not notice it. By spring, God help you, it will smell like home. The second thing is the light. 1 room, 14 feet by 16, and the only light in it is the fire at the far end and one stub of candle on a shelf. So the whole place swims in a low orange dusk. And out of that dusk, 11 faces have turned to look at you. Nobody says much. A man near the door, dark-haired, with an accent out of the north of Ireland, shifts sideways on his bench to let you and your snow melt past. A thick-set man by the fire looks up from a shoe he is sewing, looks at your feet first, the way a farrier looks at a horse, then at your face. A boy who cannot be 16 yet watches you with his mouth a little open, and from the lower bunk in the far corner, the oldest man in the room, gray-stubbled, 45, if he is a day, looks you over slow, and then points with his chin at the one empty bunk, upper tier, far corner, against the north wall, the coldest sleeping place in the hut, as far from the fire as a man can get, and still be indoors. That one is yours, he says, and there is no meanness in it, and there is no apology in it either. It is simply the law, and you know the law as well as he does, because it is the law in every hut in this camp. The new man sleeps coldest. You will work your way toward that fire, one bunk at a time, as men leave, or men, ordi, and every man between you and the flames earned his spot the same way. One cold night after another. A hut has no officers, friend, but do not let anyone tell you it has no order. So you climb up, and you spread your blanket on the planks. And here is the moment I brought you all this way to feel. The straw under the planks is packed down in the shape of a man. There is a worn place where a shoulder goes, and a worn place where a hip goes, and they are set for a body about your size. And they were made by Amos of Litchfield, night after night, all winter, before they carried him down the street on a blanket. You lie down into the shape of him, because there is nowhere else to lie, and the shape fits you, and you lie there a moment, looking at the underside of a sod roof and feeling what any honest man would feel about that. All of it at once. Below you, the hut goes back to its evening. The fire snaps. The shoemaker's thread hisses through leather. Somebody stirs the kettle, and somebody asks whether the wood detail came back. And the boy says he heard the British in Philadelphia have fresh bread every single morning, and gets told, warily, by 3 men at once, to shut up about the bread. Snow ticks on the roof, softening into rain, and the wind works at the north wall, a foot from your ear. Patient as ever, looking for the gap in the clay it has been looking for all winter. 11 strangers, one fire, and you. By morning you will know some of their names. By the end of this winter, friend, you will know the sound of each man's breathing in the dark well enough to tell them apart with your eyes shut. And you will know which cough is only a cough and which one is the other kind. And you will know exactly what it costs a man to give away half of nothing, but that is ahead. Tonight, you are only the 12th man, the stranger in the cold corner, lying in the printed shape of a sick farmer, listening to a small fire hold off a large winter. Down below, the man on the bench by the door banks the fire for the night and turns the one candle out with his fingers, and the hut settles, and the dark comes in close. Sleep light Soldier, tomorrow, this place starts teaching you its laws. You wake before dawn because somebody's boot heel has come down 8 inches from your head. It is the man from the bunk below, climbing down in the dark to feed the fire. And this is your first lesson in the oldest law of the hut. So lie still in the printed shape of Amos and learn it. The fire never dies. All night, every night, all winter, somebody's turn. It is to wake in the black cold, find the wood pile by feel, and coax the coals back up before they go gray. Because a hut that lets its fire go out at 2 in the morning is a hut full of men who will spend the next day too stupid with cold to do their duty. And because starting a new fire with damp wood and a flint in a February dark is a punishment nobody assigns twice. The turns go by the bunks, in order, around the room, night after night, and no man is above the rotation, and no man is below it. The corporal takes his turn. The sick take their turn until they truly cannot. Tomorrow night, friend, the turn is yours, and the man below you will tell you so at supper with exactly 4 words. You have the fire. Lie there and watch him work, because there is a right way, and the hut has had all winter to find it. He does not throw fresh wood on the coals and climb back into bed, for green wood laid on low coals will sulk and smoke and die. He rakes the coals together first into one red heart, lays the driest sticks across in a crib, the way you would lay a little cabin, and stands the wet wood on end against the chimney stones to either side, where the heat can spend the next 4 hours drying it out for the man who has the fire after him. Every night, each man dries the next man's wood. Nobody decided that. It grew the way the good laws grow, and the man who forgets it hears about it from 11 others, and does not forget it again. Gray light comes up in the cracks around the door, and the hut rises 1 man at a time. And now you can finally see who you live with. 11 men. And it will take you days to get all the names to stick. So this morning, just take them the way you would take a new field, by its landmarks. The oldest is the gray stubbled man in the warm corner bunk, the one who assigned you your cold one, a Sergeant 11, busted back to private over a matter he does not discuss. And the hut runs on his word anyway, because rank is a paper thing, and the hut does not read. The shoemaker is the thick-set one, from a Rhode Island family of leathermen, and his bench by the fire is the second warmest place in the hut, and nobody begrudges him an inch of it, for reasons your feet will understand shortly. The boy is Ezra, 16 years, by his telling, 15 by his face, who followed 2 brothers into the army and does not say much about where the brothers are now. The Irishman sleeps nearest the door, by his own choice, first to feel the draft and first out of it every morning. A talker, a singer when there is anything to sing about, quick with his hands and quicker with his opinions of the Congress. And working down the bunks there is a weaver, and a hired man, and a fisherman from Stonington who swears the cold on the water is worse than this, and convinces nobody. And there is Cato. Cato has the bunk one in from the fire on the south wall, second best sleeping place in the hut, earned the same as everybody else's, 1 cold night at a time since December. He is a free black man from Rhode Island, a farmer, older than you, quiet, the way the sergeant is quiet. And he holds one distinction in this company that nobody argues with, which is that he is the best shot in it. This army you have joined, friend, has men like Cato in its ranks by the thousands, black men free and enslaved, standing the same watches and drawing the same rations and dying of the same fevers. And it will be nearly 200 years before this country fields another army as mixed as the one shivering on this hillside. The hut does not remark on it. The hut has narrower concerns, like the woodpile, and whether the thaw will hold, and what, if anything, is going to be in the kettle tonight. Which brings us to the second great law, and the most delicate one. So watch closely, because supper is where a hut lives or dies. The ration, when there is one, comes to the hut in common, and the hut must divide it. And hungry men watching a knife go through a small piece of salt pork are the rawest audience on this earth. One thumb's difference between two portions, noticed twice. And by March, you have a hut split into camps that do not speak. And there are huts like that in this camp. Friend, plenty of them. And they are colder inside than the weather can account for. So the hut does what soldiers and sailors have done with short rations for as long as there have been ships and wars. The divider cuts the shares as even as his eye can make them, and lays them out, and then he turns his back to the food, and the sergeant points at a share, any share, in any order, and says to the divider's back, whose, and the divider, blend, calls a name, whose, another name, 12 shares, 12 name, and the divider names his own last of all, without knowing which it is. So no man alive can say the knife favored anybody, least of all the hand that held it. The first time you watch it done, it strikes you as ceremony. Then the shares come off the board, and you see what is actually in a share this week, and you understand it is nothing of the kind. When the pieces are that small, fairness is a structural matter, like the clay in the walls. The hut cannot be kept warm, and it cannot be kept fed. And so the hut keeps the one thing it can, which is square. And it keeps that the way it keeps the fire, all night, every night. Without exception, there are smaller laws, and you learn them all inside a week. Wet wool goes on the pegs by the chimney, and every garment moves one peg outward when a wetter one comes in, and no man's coat outranks another man's socks. The man who has the fire tonight gets the near seat at supper tonight. Tradition. A small rent paid on his broken sleep. Nobody wakes a sleeping man except for duty or food. Nobody asks what is in a letter unless the man reading it offers. And when the boy Ezra gets a letter and goes to the cold end of the hut with it and sits a long time, the hut arranges without one word spoken to need something from the far side of the room. All 11 of them, for as long as it takes, and nobody ever sits on Amos's bunk except you, whose bunk it now is. His kit went with him to the hospital hut. His shape stayed in the straw, under your blanket. Every few days, somebody asks the orderly sergeant after him, and the answer comes back the same, holding on, and the hut receives the news with a nod and goes about its business. And if you think the hut has forgotten him, friend, wait until you see what happens some weeks on. And I will say no more about it now. 12 men, then, and you, the 12th. They did not choose each other. The war chose them, and sickness sorted them, and a clerk's pen assigned them. 12 strangers from 12 different lives, packed into one smoky room the size of a farm kitchen. But every night at dark they choose the same fire, and feed it in their turn, and dry each other's wood, and divide what little there is with their backs turned and their eyes shut. There are finer definitions of a country than that one. There are not many truer. Now it is your third evening in the hut, and the kettle is empty, and I mean that plainly. Tonight there is no meat in this camp, and no dried fish, and no peas, and no rice. And what the commissary issued to the company this afternoon was flour, loose flour, scooped into haversacks. A few cupfuls to a man, and so tonight you will eat the dish this winter is famous for. And since you will hear its name for the rest of your life, you had best learn to make it. Watch the Irishman. He has the touch. Flour and water, worked in the palm to a gray paste. No salt yet. Patience, patted flat into a little cake about the size of your hand and about the thickness of misery, laid directly on a flat stone that has been sitting in the edge of the fire since mid-afternoon, and turned once with a knife when the downside stiffens, and taken off when both faces are scorched and the middle has given up being dough without ever quite agreeing to be bread. The men call it firecake. It tastes like the stone, and the smoke, and the flour. In that order, it sits in a man's stomach like wet sand, and it is supper. And along this company street tonight, some hundreds of men are eating it. And along other streets, some hundreds of men have less. There is a surgeon in this camp, a Connecticut man named Albigence Waldo, who is keeping a diary through all this, and it survives. Friend, you can read it today, and in it he wrote down the joke the whole army was making that winter. A voice calls out, "What have you for your dinners, boys?" And the answer comes back, "Nothing but fire, cake, and water." Sir. Breakfast, the same call, the same answer, fire, cake, and water. Sir. It reads almost merry on the page, the way soldiers' jokes do. And Waldo knew better, because on his sick rounds he was watching what a month of that diet does to men in wet clothes. And his diary says that too, in plainer language than I will use tonight. Now here's the question you are asking around your portion of scorched paste. And it is the right question. So let us go find the answer. Where is the food? Because the food exists. Friend, that is the maddening truth at the bottom of this famous winter. And I want you to see it whole. This is Pennsylvania, some of the richest farm country on the face of the earth, a land of wheat and cattle and fat barns, and the harvest of 1777 was not a failure. At this hour there is salt beef in New Jersey, bought and paid for with Continental money. Sitting in barrel, there is flour up the Susquehanna, milled and sacked. There are cattle in New England that were promised to this army months ago. Take a map of the Middle States tonight, and stick a pin in every pile of provisions that belongs, on paper, to the army starving at Valley Forge. And you would run out of pins. The food exists. What does not exist is the road between the food and the kettle. And I mean everything that word road should mean. Follow one barrel of that Jersey beef toward your supper and watch what happens to it. It wants a wagon. The army's wagons are scattered and broken, and the teamsters who drive them are hired civilians, paid in Continental paper that loses value while it sits in their pockets. And a farmer with a sound wagon can earn better money hauling anything else for anybody else. And many do. And some of those who do take the wagon straight into Philadelphia and sell to the British, who pay in silver. Say the barrel finds a wagon anyway. A patriot teamster. There were plenty. Now, it wants horses. And the horses are January horses. Worked thin on scant forage, hauling through freeze and thaw on roads that the season has churned into troughs of mud that set overnight like bad mortar. Horses die on those roads by the hundred. Friend, this very winter, in harness. And where a team fails, the load stops. And up and down the roads of Pennsylvania this February, there are wagons standing abandoned in the frozen ruts with the army's dinner still in them, going nowhere. And say the barrel beats all that. There is a last enemy waiting, and this one wears no uniform and has no smell, because it is made entirely of paper. The department that feeds this army, the commissary, was picked apart by Congress this past summer, reorganized on principles that read handsomely in York and worked nowhere on earth. And its best, men quit over it. And the men who replace them are fewer and greener and buried in accounts. And while the states quarrel with the Congress, and the Congress quarrels with itself over who owes what to whom, the purchasing stalls, and the contracts lapse, and the barrel of beef sits in New Jersey, with winter coming down on it, thoroughly bought, thoroughly owned, and thoroughly beyond the reach of the 12 stomachs in this hut. That is the machine, friend, or rather the place where the machine should be. Britain has been feeding armies across an ocean for 100 years, and has counting houses and contractors and a navy to do it with. The United States is 3 years old. It has never fed a standing army through a winter. It has no treasury worth the name, and it is learning, this winter, on your body, that a revolution can survive its battles and still very nearly die of arithmetic. But that is the view from above. And supper is eaten low. So come back down to the fire, because the hut is having its own opinion of all this, and the hut's opinion has more salt in it. Literally. As it happens, the Irishman has finished his cake, and he stands and reaches down his musket from its pegs, and the hut perks up the way a congregation perks up, because they know this right and you do not. He tips the muzzle down over a square of paper and taps the barrel twice, and out of the gun slides a little linen bundle the size of a walnut. Sal, friend, his whole remaining fortune of it, kept in the driest place a soldier owns, the one place in this leaking world guaranteed to stay dry, and carried there since a lucky trade back in the autumn. He unrolls the linen on the bench, and with the flat of his knife he divides that pinch of salt 12 ways. 12 little heaps you could hide under a thumbnail apiece. And he does it with his tongue between his teeth like a Philadelphia goldsmith weighing dust. And then he looks up and says, "Well, gentlemen, seeing as the Congress has provided the flour, I have provided the feast." And the hut laughs. It is not much of a joke, but it has been a firecake week. And the laugh goes around the fire like something warm being passed. And each man takes his heap of salt on a wet fingertip and eats his last bite of scorched paste, properly seasoned. And for 1 minute, in the middle of February, in the hungriest camp in America, supper in this hut has the taste of an actual supper. And something else, too, harder to name, that stays after the salt is gone. Mark this evening, friend, Congress could not get a barrel of beef 40 miles. A private soldier just fed 12 men out of a musket barrel. Between those two facts lies everything this army is, and everything this winter will ask of it. And when you wonder in the weeks ahead how these men can possibly hold together, come back to this fire and watch that knife blade one more time, moving a treasure the size of a walnut into 12 exactly equal parts. The fire is yours tonight. Bank it well, and dry the next man's wood. Supper is done, and the fire is built up for the evening. And now you find out why the shoemaker's bench sits in the second warmest spot in the hut, and why not one man in 11 has ever grumbled about it. His name is Job, out of a Rhode Island family that has worked leather for 3 generations. And when the war took him, it thought it was getting a private of infantry. And it was wrong. It was getting the most valuable man on this company street. Every evening after supper his bench comes near the fire, and his awl, and his waxed thread, and his little iron last come out of a sack, and the line forms. Tonight, the line is the fisherman, holding one shoe in both hands like a dead bird, and the weaver, who is down to one shoe and one wrapping of rawhide. And you, friend, because the sergeant looked at your feet on your first morning, the way the shoemaker looked at them your first evening, and told you to see Job before the week was out. So sit on the floor by the bench, pull off what is left of your right shoe, and hand it over. And while he turns it in the firelight and clicks his tongue at it, let me tell you what a shoe is in this camp. A shoe is the whole war, friend. It is the war made small enough to wear. When this army marched into these hills in December, a return went up to headquarters, a plain count on paper, and the count said that close on 3,000 men of this army were unfit for duty for want of shoes and clothing. Not wounded, mind, not sick, barefoot, or next to it, in December, in Pennsylvania, and the number grew through the deep of the winter as the shoes that existed wore through. You have heard, I expect, the famous thing, the bloody footprints in the snow. Everyone in America has heard it, and it has been polished so smooth by 2 centuries of telling that some folks now doubt it ever happened at all. It happened. General Washington himself set it down on paper that winter, that you might track the army by the blood of its feet, and he was writing to shame the Congress. And he chose that image because it was the true one that would shame them hardest, but hold it honestly. The way this story holds everything. It was the worst of it. And the worst of it was never the whole of it. This army's misery was not issued evenly. And that is one of the strangest facts of this strange winter. Because it went by states. Friend, this is 13 armies wearing one name. Each state was to clothe its own regiments. And some states did their duty handsomely. And some did it poorly. And some hardly did it at all. And the difference is walking around this camp on 10,000 feet. Down the hill there are Virginia regiments where half the men stand their watches in rawhide wrappings, and a quarter cannot stand a watch at all, and they lie in their bunks by day for plain want of clothes to muster in. And across the way there are Rhode Island men, Job's own state, tolerably shod and warmly coated, because their assembly bestirred itself. And there are Connecticut regiments, yours, somewhere in the middling range, patched but marching, same army, same snow. 2 men can stand 10 feet apart at the same fire in this camp, and one of them is equipped for winter, and the other is dressed for August. And the thing that decided it was which side of a state line their farms sat on. There is a lesson in that, about what these 13 quarrelsome states have not yet learned to be. And this winter is teaching it the hard way, one frostbitten toe at a time. And I will let the lesson lie there, because Job has finished his inspection of your shoe, and his verdict is one word. And the word is, well, he says, meaning it is bad. And then he goes to work. And you watch the most useful hands at Valley Forge do what they do. The sole has parted from the upper along the outside edge. A gap you have been packing with dry grass for a week, and the heel is worn through at one corner to the thickness of paper. He wets the leather at the seam to make it work soft. He cuts a welt strip from a boot top too far gone to save. Dead men's boots, and ruined boots, being the parts bin this whole camp runs on, and he lays it along the failed seam, and then the awl goes through, and the 2 needles chase each other's hole, over and under, his elbows rising and falling, steady as a man rowing. He works a lump of tallow along the thread every few stitches so it will draw smooth and shed water. For the heel he pegs on a lift of that same salvaged boot top with little wooden pegs he whittles by the fireside of an evening, a habit his hands do without him. And all the while the line waits its turn easy, and the hut talks its low evening talk around the work. Because this bench is the nearest thing the hut has to a hearth ceremony. The awl hissing, the fire snapping, the shoe coming slowly back from the dead. While he works, he talks, in the mild way of a man whose eyes are busy. And what he talks about tonight is worth your hearing. There is a great scarcity of leather in this camp, he says, and it is a scandal past understanding. Because look about you. This army drives cattle in and slaughters them, when there are cattle at all, and every one of those beasts wears a hide, and the hides have been sold off or spoiled or left to rot for want of anyone whose business it was to save them. Wagon loads of tomorrow's shoes thrown away behind the slaughter pens, while the army goes barefoot in front of them. Headquarters knows it, he says. There is even talk of trading hides to the tanners for finished leather. A hide for a side, and it will come to something by and by. But by and by is a long march. And meanwhile, he says, and here he holds your shoe up to the firelight and sights along the new seam. Meanwhile there is me, and there it is. Friend, the quiet arithmetic of this man's winter. In some fine, warm office, it will be reckoned some day that this army wanted so many thousand pairs of shoes, and the ledgers will show how few ever came. What no ledger will ever show is the counting that happened on this bench. Every pair of feet that Job keeps under a man this winter is a man who can stand his watch, and every man who can stand his watch is a musket on the line. And you may total up his evenings if you like. 2 shoes a night. Some nights, 3, 6 nights a week. From December to the thaw. Do that sum, and set it against the sum in the warm office, and you will conclude what this hut concluded long ago, which is that the Congress of the United States has not kept this company on its feet this winter. A private from Rhode Island has, with an all, at the rate of a candle stub and a seat by the fire, paid in full. He hands your shoe back mended, sole sewn home, heel built, square, and he looks at you over it, and says the thing he says to every man in the line. His whole fee and his whole sermon: keep it greased, and keep it off the fire. Wet leather dried too fast dies like anything else, dried too fast. Slow, he says, tapping the toe once with the awl handle. Everything that lasts is slow. You put your shoe back on your foot, and it holds. And it will hold for weeks now. And you take your place among the men who owe him, which is all of them. Outside, the wind has come around north again, and somewhere down the darkening street, the relief guard is turning out. 12 men buttoning up for 4 hours on the line, and every one of them walking out that door on Job's stitches. They gave out no medals at Valley Forge, friend, but if they had, there is a bench by a fire in a Connecticut hut where I would pin the first one. Now the hut goes quiet around you, because the evening is over and the night is beginning. And this night, you're third in the hut. The fire is yours. The sergeant said it at supper. The 4 words, "You have the fire." And the men turned in one by one after Job's bench was cleared. And now it is somewhere past the middle of the night, and you are the only man awake in 14 feet by 16, sitting on the low bench with your blanket around your shoulders, doing the oldest duty there is, keeping the fire. So let us keep it together, you and I, the whole watch, and let the war go hang for an hour, because a man on the fire watch is entitled to think of nothing, and thinking of nothing is a country I know the roads to. Start with the coals, the way the man before you started. Rake them in, out of their gray edges, into one red heart in the middle of the hearth. They brighten as they gather, the way coals do, glad of each other's company. And the first small flames stand up through the crib of dry sticks you lay across, and the light of it moves out across the floor and up the log walls and touches the 11 sleeping men one by one. Here, a hand hanging down from an upper bunk. There, the boy Ezra's face gone smooth and younger even than his lying age. There, the slow hill of the sergeant's shoulder rising and falling. 12 breaths in this room, counting yours, friend. And now that the hut is silent, you can hear that no 2 of them are alike. The fisherman breathes in long swells, suitably enough. The weaver has a catch in his, a small hitch at the top. like a thread taken up. Job sleeps as quiet as his own wax. And, from the bunk below yours, the Irishman by the door snores in a soft, ridiculous music that the hut has long since stopped hearing, the way a mill town stops hearing the mill. Feed the fire slow, and mind the smoke. This chimney is logs and clay, honest work, but a poor draught. And when the wind sits in the north, the smoke thinks twice about leaving. And tonight, the wind sits in the north. It curls back down and hangs at head height in a flat blue layer and stings your eyes. And there is no help for it. Every hut in this city is the same. The men of this army will go home in the spring with their eyes rimmed red like foxes, and their clothes will carry the smoke smell for a year of washings. And there are soldiers writing letters this very winter that joke about it, that they are being smoked like hams for the Congress's table. You will weep a little at your post tonight, friend, from the smoke alone. And you will not be the only man in this camp weeping over a fire at 3 in the morning. And not all of it, everywhere, is the smoke. And that is as much as either of us will say about that. Listen, now, the sleet has passed over, and in behind it has come the hard, clear cold. And a still night at Valley Forge is not silent. It ticks. The logs of the hut tick as the frost tightens them. Little knuckle cracks in the walls. The whole hut flexing like a ship. Out on the company street, the snow has a voice under the sentry's feet. That dry, complaining squeak that only the coldest snow makes. 3 steps. A pause at the end of his beat. 3 steps back. Farther off, down the hill, a horse stamps in the horse lines. Once, twice, wood on frozen wood. Somewhere in the next street, a door scrapes. A man coughs his way to the sinks and back, his own fire watch or his own trouble, and the door scrapes shut. And under all of it, so low and so constant, you must stop breathing to find it. There is a sound like the world's largest kettle at the world's lowest simmer. And that, friend, is the sound of 1,500 fires burning at once. The whole city of huts breathing through its chimneys in the dark. Step out and see it. You are allowed. Firekeepers do. 1 minute for the woodpile and 1 for themselves. Ease the door to behind you and stand in the street in your blanket. And let the cold take hold of your face while you look. The camp lies away down the slope and up the far rise. Row on row on row of huts. Black shapes on gray snow. No lamp burning anywhere. For there is no oil in this army for lamps. But every chimney is a dim red star. Hundreds within your sight. Thousands beyond it. Each one pulsing a little as its fire draws. Each one somebody's turn. Somebody awake on the bench the way you are awake. From the Schuylkill clear back to the outer line. The greatest city between Boston and Philadelphia tonight. And every light in it banked low and tended by hand. Above it all the smoke stands up in the still air. Hundreds of pale columns rising straight until some high wind finds them and lays them all one way. Southeast, toward Philadelphia. As if even the smoke of this camp had its orders. The men call this place the Smoky City. And from where you stand, you can see the whole joke and the whole truth of it at once. A city with no street lamp, no bell, no window glass, and no bread. That is nonetheless, at 3 in the morning, warm at 1,500 hearths, because it takes turns being awake. That is the machine. Friend, the real one. You have seen now what the fire eats. It eats wood, half a forest of it before spring, whole hillsides, passing armload by armload through these little clay throats. It eats sleep. One man's worth in every hut, in every watch, the whole army paying its nightly tax of broken rest, and in exchange it keeps the only promise anybody here is certain of, however short the bread, however far the Congress, however long the winter. The men of this hut will not wake coal, wood in, warmth out, all night, every night, 100 and some nights running, and the account never once allowed to fail. Go back in. The heart of the fire wants raking, and the dry crib has settled, and the wet wood you stood against the chimney at midnight has begun to steam faintly, which means it is curing on schedule for the weaver. Who has the fire tomorrow? Stack it. Bank the coals shallow. Sit back down in your blanket, along toward the graying of the cracks around the door. The cold comes to its deepest, the way it does just before morning, and the 11 breaths behind you go on rising and falling, and the little fire stands its post. And so do you. There will be harder watches this winter. Friend, I will not pretend otherwise. And one of them is nearer than you think. But whatever else is coming to this hut, it will have to come in past the fire, and past the man on the bench, and there is a comfort in that arrangement, worth exactly what it costs, which is 1 night's sleep in 12. The relief of it is simple, and it comes at first light, when the sergeant's eyes open of themselves, and find the hearth alive, and find you on the bench, and he nods once, the way he nodded at your bunk assignment. No more words than the thing needs. Fire kept, night crossed. Morning, friend. The next evening, at supper, the boy Ezra asks about Amos. It comes out of nowhere, the way a boy's questions do. The kettle has actual meat in it tonight, a little salt pork, come up with the flour. And maybe it is the smell of pork that does it. Some memory attached, because Ezra looks up from his portion and says, to the room in general, Amos liked the pork ends. He always traded for the ends. And the hut goes on eating, but something in the sound of the hut changes, and the sergeant says, without looking up, that he does. And mind, you said that right. Boy, he does. And Ezra says it back, corrected. He does like the pork ends. So now the hut is thinking about Amos, and you are sleeping in the man's shape every night. Friend, so you have earned the story. And tonight, I am going to tell it to you straight, because it is the story of the real enemy at Valley Forge. And half of America has never heard it right. Amos of Litchfield started coughing around Christmas. Nothing in that. Every man in this camp coughs from the smoke alone, and a cough in a winter camp is like a dog barking in a farmyard. Constant, and mostly meaning nothing. But the hut lives close, and the hut hears everything. And somewhere in January, the hut began to notice that Amos's cough had changed its nature. It had moved down in him. It had found a wet place low in his chest and settled into it. And at night, from this bunk, where you are lying now, it came up in long tearing runs that left him breathless and swearing softly at the ceiling. And in the mornings, he was slower to the fire. And one week he traded away his pork ends, which the hut noted the way a bank notes a withdrawal, and said nothing, and watched. And Amos, friend, Amos did what soldiers do, which is the worst thing, which is he hid it. He stood his watches. He kept his turn at the fire. When the surgeon came down the company street on his rounds, Amos arranged to be busy at the woodpile with his back to the road, and he muffled the cough in his blanket at night until the muffling itself woke the hut. And the reason he did all this is the reason you must understand tonight, because it is the black joke at the middle of this whole winter. Amos was not hiding his sickness because he feared being thought weak. He was hiding it because he feared the hospital. And every man in this hut, watching him hide it, understood him perfectly, because every man in this hut fears the hospital too. And they are not wrong to. And that is the hard part. Here is what the fear knows. This camp is the healthiest looking death trap in America. There is no battle here. There will never be a battle here. And yet men leave this camp on blankets every week and do not come back. And the thing that takes them has no uniform and no cannon and no name that the year 1778 can put a face to. The Army's returns call it camp fever, and putrid fever, and the flux, and the itch gone bad, and pneumonia, when it finishes in the chest the way it is finishing in Amos's. A later age will sort those words out into typhus and typhoid and dysentery and influenza, and will understand exactly how they travel. In the water, on the lice, on unwashed hands, breath to breath, in a room 14 feet by 16, where 12 men sleep close for warmth. That knowledge is coming. Friend, it is barely 100 years off, and it will arrive about a century too late for this hillside. The men of this camp know none of it. What they know is the pattern, the same way sailors know weather. Crowded huts sicken, sick huts sicken worse, and the hospital huts, where all the sickness in the brigade is gathered under one roof for its own good, are the sickest places of all. And a man carried in with one fever may lie down next to 3 others he has not caught yet. The surgeons know the pattern too, and better, and do not think for 1 minute that they are idle. This Army's medical men are fighting with both hands all winter. They badger the brigades about the sinks and the offal and the dead horses, and get orders issued about camp cleanliness that read like scolding letters from an anxious mother. And they are right in every particular. They spread the sick into farmhouses and barns and meeting houses for miles around, 11 miles out, 20 miles out, anywhere with a roof, to thin the crowding. And this same winter, at the head of the Army's hospitals, there are physicians pressing a new and violently argued idea that a man can be given a mild dose of the smallpox on purpose, in a scratch on the arm, and be sick a little, and then safe forever. And General Washington has already ordered it done through this Army, quietly, haute behaute, one of the great cold-blooded gambles of the whole war. And it works. Friend, smallpox, the terror of every army of the age, will not run wild through this camp. They got that one right, with the science of their day and their nerve alone. And history owes them the acknowledgement, but against the fevers, the daily grinding fevers. The surgeons of 1778 are men fighting smoke with their hands. They have bark and wine when the stores hold out, and mostly the stores do not. They have bleeding and blistering, which help nothing and harm quietly. Above all, they have what Ruth Cole had, if you remember her. Friend, watching, nursing, and broth and hope, and it is not nothing. It has never been nothing. And still the returns come up to headquarters every week with their terrible patient columns. Sick present, sick absent, dead. And before this army marches away in June, those columns will have swallowed close to 2,000 men. Say that number slowly. 2,000. No battle within 20 miles all winter. And this camp will bury more Americans than fell at Brandywine and Germantown together. More than the British will kill in most full years of this war. And they will go out of the world in barns and hospital huts, in ones and twos, with no drums. And the great history books will spend one sentence on them where they spend chapters on the battles. And that proportion, friend, is exactly backward to how it felt to live here. 4 days before you came to this hut, Amos stopped being able to hide it. He stood up from his bunk on a Tuesday morning and could not finish standing. And the hut caught him, and there was no discussion. The time for the fear was past. The sergeant and Cato carried him down the company street on a blanket to the brigade hospital hut. And the last thing Amos did as they took him out the door was apologize to the hut in general for the trouble. And no one has repeated what the sergeant said back to him. But Ezra was there. And Ezra says, the sergeant walked at the head of the blanket the whole way like a man walking into a wind. Since then, the news comes every few days through the orderly sergeant. Second-hand, thin, holding on, feverish but took broth, holding on. The hut receives each report with a nod and goes about its business. And you would take them for indifferent. Friend, if you did not know how to read a hut by now, but look once at what is actually happening in this room. Amos's pipe sits on the shelf over his bunk. Your bunk, untouched, packed with the last tobacco he owned, waiting. His name is still called in the hut's accounting when firewood is drawn for 12. And tonight, when the shares came off the board, the divider cut the pork in 12 parts, as always. And one portion, the one with the ends, went uneaten into the kettle for tomorrow. And nobody explained it. And nobody had to. Late that night, you wake for no reason you can name, the way you woke on your first night here. And the hut is dark, and the fire is banked and low. And you lie in Amos's shape listening, and you realize what woke you. It is the man in the bunk across the aisle, the weaver, the one whose breathing has that small catch at the top, like a thread taken up. You have slept 4 nights in this hut, and already his breathing is part of the furniture of the dark to you. And tonight the catch is different, deeper, a shade longer at the top. It is probably nothing. Friend, it is the smoke, or the cold snap, or your own ears making trouble at 3 a.m. And he will likely be at the fire by dawn, same as ever. grumbling about the wood, but you lie awake a long while, all the same, doing what the hut does, what the whole camp does, all night, every night, in 1,500 dark rooms, counting breaths that are not yours, listening for the chain, the fire settle, the weaver turns over, and the catch smooths out, and breath follows breath, even and easy. 11 of them, and yours makes 12. Not tonight. Then sleep. Soldier, the winter is long, and the hut is listening, and it never entirely stops. 2 mornings on, there comes a knock, and knocks are rare in a hut, because the hut's men come and go like weather. So the whole room looks up, and the sergeant says, "Come ahead." And the door opens on a cold, bright day, and standing in it, with the light behind her, is a woman. She is perhaps 40, in a brown wool cloak gone the color of the season, a basket on her hip, and a bundle under her arm and her hands. When she sets the bundle down on the bench, a cracked red across the knuckles, split at 2 of them, the hands of somebody who works in water outdoors in February. The Irishman is up off his bench with a greeting before the door has shut, and half the hut says her name in the easy way. You say a neighbor's Mrs. Mead, and she says good morning to the hut entire, and asks after its health like a woman asking after a family she knows, which, friend, is what she is doing. She is the wife of a sergeant in the next company down the street, and the bundle on the bench is the hut's mending. 4 shirts, a pair of breeches, and the boy Ezra's second stockings, all of it washed, all of it darned and patched, where darning and patching would answer, and she goes through it piece by piece with the sergeant, businesslike, showing her work. This shirt was more whole than shirt, she says, holding up the weaver's. So I faced the whole shoulder with cloth off a condemned tent, and it will outlast the war now, if he does not. She has turned the boy's stockings heel for toe. The worn parts moved up where the wear is lighter, an old trick, and Ezra takes them back with both hands like something at Christmas. And payment is made in the currency this camp actually runs on. The sergeant hands over a share of the hut's flour ration, saved back for the purpose, and a little of the salt pork, wrapped in a rag, and Mrs. Mead weighs it with her eyes. Not greedy, just exact. A woman who keeps accounts because her family lives inside the accounts, and nods, and it goes into the basket. Now, friend, while she and the sergeant settle up, let me tell you who this woman is, because the history of this famous winter mostly forgot to, and it is a poor gap in the telling. There are somewhere between 400 and 500 women wintering in this camp, and children with them besides. The Army's books, where they notice these women at all, call them camp followers, and later ages will hear that phrase and smirk at it, and later ages should be ashamed of themselves. These are soldiers' wives, the greater part of them, wives and mothers and widows of the Army, women whose men went into the ranks and whose choices thereafter were to starve at home alone or follow the regiment and work. And they chose to follow and work, and the Army. which is many things, but is not stupid. Put them on the strength. That is the actual term in the actual books. On the strength of the regiment, they draw a ration, generally a half ration, sometimes drawn against work performed. And for it, they do the labor that keeps an 18th century army from rotting where it stands. They wash. Start there, because in this camp, that word is not small. Washing for soldiers in February means fires kept burning at the creek side, and kettles of water hauled and heated, and lye soap when there is any, and bare hands in the water, hour on hour at the wringing, in air cold enough to stiffen the wet cloth on the line while she pins it. Those split knuckles on Mrs. Meade's hands are that creek. Friend, and understand what the work is actually worth, because the surgeons do. Filth breeds the itch, and worse than the itch, and the fevers that empty these huts ride on dirty cloth and crowded bodies. And no one here can see the true passengers, the lice and what the lice carry. But the pattern is known even so. Clean shirts sicken less. Every kettle of boiling wash water at that creek is fighting the same enemy as the surgeons, and fighting it, if we are honest, to considerably more effect than the bleeding bowl. And they nurse. When the hospital huts filled past what the surgeons' mates could tend, it is women who sit the night watches by the fever beds, spooning broth, keeping fires, doing for dying boys from Massachusetts and Carolina what their own mothers would have crossed the world to do. Some are paid a small wage for it out of the hospital accounts. Some are simply there, and they cook, and they haul water, and they mend, as you have seen, and they carry news and letters between the huts, and they keep the children who are also here. Friend, do not forget it. There are children this morning sliding on the frozen puddles down by the artillery park, growing up inside a starving army, the way other children grow up inside a mill town. And the sound of them at their games floats up over this camp on still days and does more for it. Some men write home, then a ration of rum. The army could not function without these women, and the proof is on the books, in the rations drawn and the wages paid. And there is one more woman in this camp this morning, at the top of it, and her presence is its own kind of signal. Martha Washington came up from Virginia through the winter roads some weeks ago, as she has come to every winter camp of this war, and will come to every one after. And she keeps the General's stone headquarters house down by the creek, and manages his table and his correspondence hours, and sits sewing of an evening with the other officers' ladies at work on shirts and stockings for the men, and visits the sick when she goes about. The soldiers see her pass in a plain gown and take a curious comfort in it that has nothing to do with anything she says, for what her being here says is plain enough. The commander's own family has moved into this hungry camp for the duration. Nobody at the top of this army is wintering somewhere warmer than you, but it is not the general's lady I brought to your door this morning. Friend, it is this one, in the brown cloak, with the split knuckles and the exact eyes, because history will keep the name of Martha Washington, and it kept almost none of the others. You may search the records of this winter for the washerwomen and the nurses and the menders, and you will find them mostly as marks in a ration book, a tally of women, drawn and allowed no names. And when the monuments go up on this ground, a century on, there will be bronze enough for generals and none for the creek. So look once more, deliberately, before she goes, the basket riding on her hip with her family's flour in it, the mended shirts on the bench that will be on 4 men's backs on the line by nightfall, the hands she catches you looking, being a woman who misses nothing, and takes your measure in one pass. The new man in the cold corner, and says to the sergeant, that one's coat wants the elbow seen to before it goes entirely. Send it down with the next lot. And to you, oh mildly, mind you do. And then she is away up the company street with her basket through the bright cold, stopping 2 doors up where more mending waits, and the door shuts, and the hut goes back about its morning. The weaver pulls on his patched shirt, the one that will outlast the war now if he does not. It fits him warm across the faced shoulder, double cloth against the north wind. Another man's condemned tent standing between his chest and February. Small wars, friend. Inside the big one, a woman against a winter, at a creek, with soap. Put it on the list of battles this camp is winning that no book will ever name. On your 6th evening in the hut, the orderly sergeant puts his head in the door at supper and reads 4 names off a slip, and the last of the 4 is yours. Guard mounting, he says. Outer line. Turn out at the drum. The hut receives this on your behalf with a small stir of practical sympathy, because the outer line in February is the hardest duty this camp owns. 4 hours of standing still in the coldest hours God makes. And the hut does for you what huts do. Job looks at your shoes and pronounces the stitching sound. The weaver digs out a second pair of socks, his spares, and hands them over with a shrug that forbids thanks. Cato, who has stood that line more nights than anyone in the room, gives you the working wisdom of it in one sentence. Keep your feet moving and your powder covered, and do not stare at one dark place too long, for a stared at shadow will move, he says, every time, and a green sentry firing at a stump wakes 10,000 men. And the Irishman, from his bench, gives you the countersign of the camp with a grin, because he has been out to the guardhouse and heard it, and it is a famous one tonight. The parole and countersign change every day in this army. Friend, set down from headquarters. A challenge word and an answer word, so that a man coming up on a sentry in the dark can prove he belongs to this side of the war. Most days they are plain words, town names, generals' names, but some days whoever chooses them at headquarters reaches back for a particular pair. And tonight, the Irishman says, the word going round is the pair the army used on the Delaware boats the winter before last, the night they crossed the ice to Trenton and turned the whole war around in a sleet storm. Victory or death. That was the watchword in the boats. And here it is again this winter, passed mouth to mouth along a starving line. And you may take it as coincidence if you like. Nobody in this camp takes it as coincidence. The drum goes at full dark, and you turn out. The guard forms on the company street and marches down through the city of huts. And this is your first sight of the camp at night, from inside a moving column. So look well. The hut streets go by in their rows, chimney glow and wood smoke, voices behind log walls, a fiddle somewhere being played softly and badly, and then the huts thin out and stop, and the ground opens, and you are crossing the great parade, a wide white emptiness under the stars where nothing stands at all. Beyond it, the ground rises, and on the rise the earthworks wait, and they are worth a long look, friend, because you help pay for them, even if you never swung a pick here, all winter. Between the hunger and the sickness, this army has been digging trenches and redoubts along the whole vulnerable face of the camp, walls of earth and timber thrown up by men on half rations, gun platforms and abatis, felled trees laid outward with their sharpened branches toward the enemy, like a hedge of spears a quarter-mile long. In the dark, the works read as a low black wave frozen in the act of breaking, and here and there along it, the shapes of cannons stand against the snow, muzzles out toward the southeast, toward the roads, toward the city you cannot see yet. The army that built this wall can barely feed itself, and the wall is excellent, and both of those things are true at once. And any man who thinks starving soldiers cannot dig has never seen what soldiers will do with the one enemy they can actually get their hands on. Hunger cannot be shoveled, friend. Dirt can. The old guard is relieved post by post. Formalities in the dark, low voices. And then the sergeant of the guard walks you out along the line to your post, and gives you your orders and your beat, and leaves you. And there it is. 4 hours. 1 musket. 1 man. The first quarter hour is all discipline. Learning your ground, the way Cato said. Your beat is 40 paces along the works. A gun platform at one end, a stand of abatis at the other. The snow squeaks under you, dry and complaining, and you learn its voice so you will know any other foot that touches it. The cold is a presence with a method. It finds the seams of you, wrists, neck, the small of the back, patient as water, and you understand inside the first half hour why sentries move, why the beat exists at all. Standing still in this cold is not rest. It is surrender on the installment plan, and then the discipline settles into rhythm, and the night opens up, and you begin to see the camp behind you first. From the outer line, the whole city of huts lies back down the slope, and by night it is nothing but its chimneys, thousands of dim red coals scattered across the black hills, breathing. That is what you are standing between, friend, all of it at your back. 11 men of yours in one particular glow you cannot pick out from here. Banked fire, dried wood, the weaver's breathing with its small catch, all of it entrusted to a line of cold men standing 40 paces apart in the dark. And the arithmetic of that will keep a man's spine straighter than any sergeant. Then the other thing, ahead of you, southeast, out past the dark folds of the country. The horizon is not entirely dark. There is a stain of light along it, low and dull, like the last of a sunset that refuses to finish, except it sits in the wrong quarter of the sky and it does not fade. You know what it is, before anyone tells you. Every man who stands this line knows what it is. That is Philadelphia. Friend, 18 miles. And the glow of its lamps and hearths and ovens is the last thing the outer sentries of this army look at all night. Every night. All winter. And you cannot help it. No sentry ever could. You stand your post in the squeaking snow, with your feet going numb by degrees. And you furnish that glow. The largest city in America is under those lights. The British Army is in winter quarters there. Thousands of regulars, billeted in real houses. Brick houses with glass windows, fires in proper chimneys that draw, and bread, fresh bread, the bread Ezra got told to shut up about, coming out of the city's ovens every morning by the wagon load. Their officers have taken the fine houses and made a season of it. Plays got up in the theater, balls and dinners and card evenings, ice skating on the Delaware when the freeze is good. The word that drifts out to the camp with travelers and market people makes it sound like a courtship, not a war. And if the word is half true, it is enough. Be fair. As this story is always fair, the British private soldier in his crowded billet has his own hard winter, and fuel is short in the city, and prices are cruel. But the plainest soldier on this line understands the difference in one look at that glow. They have a city. You have what you built with axes in December. They are wintering in America's capital. You are the reason they cannot come 1 mile farther into America than its light can reach, because that is the standing joke and the standing truth of this whole frozen watch. Friend, they could come. 18 miles is one long day's march for an army that wanted to make it. Some nights the rumor runs through camp like a grass fire. They are coming. Columns on the Gulf Road. And the drums beat, and the lines stand to arms in the dark, and nothing comes. And the men file back to the huts, cursing the false alarm and secretly, some of them, almost disappointed. General Howe sits in Philadelphia with a fed and rested army, and looks out at these hills, at the works you are standing on, at the wave of sharpened trees frozen mid-break, and he does his own arithmetic. And every night, all winter, the answer comes out the same, not worth the bleeding. So 2 armies lie 18 miles apart from December to June, close enough that their patrols brush and snap at each other in the country between, close enough that you can see their fires from your post, and the great battle everybody braces for never comes. And you stand 4 hours in the killing cold to guarantee an attack that is never launched. And here is the thing I want you to get your gloves around tonight. Soldier, the guarantee is why it is never launched. A guarded camp is not attacked because it is guarded. The most useless feeling duty in this army is among the most useful things it does. And nobody will ever pin a ribbon on a man for the battle that did not happen. And the battle that did not happen is the one this line wins every single night. Past the middle of the watch, when the cold has gotten into your back teeth, and the glow to the southeast has begun to seem like something you dreamed, there comes a sound up the line. Snow squeak. Several sets of feet. A low challenge from the next post. Too far to make out the words. And the answering murmur. Then the party comes on, along the works toward you. Dark shapes against darker. And you bring your musket up across your body the way you were taught, and your heart is going. Friend, do not be ashamed of it. Every green sentry's heart goes, and you call the challenge into the dark. Who comes there? And a voice answers, friends, with the countersign, and gives the word, and the word is the word. Victory or death. Quiet, half swallowed by the snow. The same 4 syllables that crossed the Delaware in the sleet 2 winters ago, spoken now on a starving hillside by shapes you cannot see, and you stand aside and present your post. All correct, and the party comes up out of the dark. And it is not the sergeant of the guard. There are 5 or 6 of them. Officers, mounted men leading their horses along the works to spare the footing, greatcoats and breath steam, and at the head of them, leading a tall horse, is a man you know at one glance in no light at all, because every soldier in this army knows him at one glance, at any distance. In any light there is, stand your post. Soldier, say nothing they do not ask for. The commander-in-chief is walking his lines tonight, and he is coming your way. And that, friend, is a chapter of its own. He comes along the works, leading his horse. And the first thing you understand about George Washington is that everything you have heard about the size of him is short of the mark. 6 feet and a hand's width above it, in a gray greatcoat with the snow fine on the shoulders of it. And he moves along the frozen ground the way big horsemen move, deliberate, nothing wasted. A man who has spent more of his life outdoors in bad weather than in rooms. The officers with him keep half a pace back. When he stops at your post, the whole party stops, and the horses blow and stamp, and he looks first. Friend, not at you. He looks at what you are guarding, out over the works, the abatis, the dead ground in front, the roads to the southeast, the glow. He reads your post like a farmer reading a fence line. And only then does he look at the sentry. What he asks is nothing for the storybooks. He asks your regiment. He asks how long since your relief, and whether you have your watch coat, and, seeing your feet, whether those shoes are sound, and you answer him in the fewest words you own. Connecticut. An hour passed. Yes, sir. Sound, sir. Mended in the hut, sir. And at the last one, something passes across the big weathered face, too brief to name in the dark, and he says, they are best mended there, and moves on. That is all. That is the whole meeting. Friend, half a minute of a February night, and he is away down the line to the next post with his officers and his led horse. And your heart is going like a drummer boy paid double. I will not tell you what he was thinking. Friend, this story does not put thoughts into the head of a real man, and it never will. But I can tell you what he knew that night, walking his frozen line, because what he knew is written down in his own hand, in letters that survive to this day, and some of it had been written only days before. So stand your post and watch him go, shape by shape, down the works, and let me read you the man from his own mail. He knew the count. Better than any man alive, he knew it, because the returns all came to him. the mercilessly exact paperwork of a starving army. So many thousand in camp, so many hundred sick present, so many hundred sick absent, farmed out to the fever wards in the barns of 3 counties. So many, and this figure he had put in a letter to Congress with his own pen that winter. Close on 3,000 men, unfit for duty for want of clothes and shoes alone, barefoot and otherwise naked. His words, "Friend, not mine." He knew that on paper he commanded one of the larger armies ever gathered on this continent, and that on any given February morning, the portion of it actually able to stand on the line with a musket was a fraction that he took care not to publish. Because if Howe in Philadelphia ever learned the true figure, Howe might finally do that arithmetic differently. And he knew how close the whole thing stood to the edge, because he had said so. In the bluntest sentence this careful man ever allowed himself. In the deep of December, with the commissary collapsing and the camp days old and nothing in the magazines, he sat in a cold tent, for he would not move into a house until his men had huts. And he wrote to the Congress at York that unless the supply of this army was mended, and mended at once, it must inevitably starve, dissolve, or disperse. Starve, dissolve, or disperse. Friend, 3 words for 3 ways, for a revolution to die without a shot. And he set them down in ink and sent them to the government of the United States as a plain forecast of events. And the weeks since that letter had gone exactly as this story has shown you. Firecake and water. Horses dead in the traces. 2 days that same winter, when the meat ration of the whole army was nothing at all, and the camp hummed with a low, mutinous muttering that the officers heard perfectly well and had the wisdom not to answer. No meat, no meat. Running hut to hut in the dark, like the croaking of crows. And he knew one thing more, the coldest of the lot, and you should know it too, because it belongs to this hillside. That winter, while he held the army together with paper and will, there were men busy at the question of whether he ought to be replaced. It never came to as much as legend later made of it. Friend, honest history says so. And this story is honest. But it was real enough. Letters passed among a few officers and a few members of Congress, comparing him unfavorably to the general who had just won the great victory up at Saratoga, sneering at the lost battles and the lost capital, wondering aloud in ink whether the cause did not deserve a luckier commander. Some of those letters found their way, as letters do, to men loyal to him, and so to him, so mock the picture entire, because the whole weight of it was on the man who just asked after your shoes. The capital lost, the army naked, the Congress fled, feeble and quarreling, the supply system in ruins beneath him, and certain gentlemen behind him measuring his coat. Any commander in Europe, friend, any one of them, carrying that ledger through that winter, resigns, or marches the army somewhere easier, or turns it on the government that starves it. Armies unpaid and unfed have turned on their masters since Rome. It is nearly a law of the world. What this one did instead, you are watching. He stayed. He answered the schemers with a few letters so level and so cold that the scheming curled up of itself by spring. He wrote, and wrote to Congress, to the states, to the governors, patient, furious mail by the ream, teaching a brand new country, one addressee at a time, that an army is not a thing you declare, but a thing you feed. He put his own family into the camp. The lady you heard of 2 chapters back, keeping his table in a little stone house by the creek that a Quaker miller rents him. 2 rooms downstairs, and his aides sleeping in the attic over the office. The headquarters of the entire Continental Army being roughly the size of 2 huts. And on nights like this one, he walks the outer line in the snow, post be post, mile on mile, asking privates about their shoes. Now, you have seen this camp, friend, top to bottom by now, so you know what that walking is worth. This army is not held together tonight by pay, for there is none, nor by food, for you have dined on the food, nor by the law, for the law cannot chase 10,000 men home across 10 state lines. It is held together by the fire rotation, and the blind division of pork, and Job's all, and Mrs. Mead's Creek, and by one thing more, the thing at the top. And the thing at the top is not a government. It is a promise with a face, walking the works at midnight where the coldest men in America can see it. The men on this line cannot read his letters. They read the greatcoat coming through the snow, and the question about the shoes, and they conclude, correctly, that the man carries them in his mind, all of them, by regiment and by state, and nearly by name, and men will stand a great deal of winter. For a commander they believe carries them in his mind. The party works on down the line. Post, to, post, challenge and countersign. The words going before him like a small fire passed hand to hand. Victory or death at each post, quieter than the wind. And at the far end of your sight, before the dock folds him in, you see the tall shape swing up onto the horse at last, done with the walked portion, and turn back down toward the camp, toward the little stone house where the candle will burn past 2. As the aides complain in their letters, it always does, over the returns, and the correspondence, and the endless sums of a starving army. The loneliest bookkeeping in American history, kept nightly in a rented parlor, 18 miles from the enemy's ballrooms. Your relief comes at the end of the 4th hour. Snow squeak and countersign, a Massachusetts man with ice in his eyebrows. And you hand over the post and the night and walk back down across the parade toward the red coals of the city. So cold, your thoughts have gone simple and slow. And the last of them, as you come into the hot streets, is simple enough for any history book, friend, and truer than most of what the history books will say. You stood 4 hours tonight, and it was long. The man out there walks that line most nights, and his watch does not end in 4 hours. His watch ends when the war does, and nobody, this February, can tell him if that is a year off, or 10, or never. The hut door, when you reach it, opens before your hand finds the latch. The door opens before your hand finds the latch, and warmth comes out of the hut and takes hold of you like a living thing. That is the only way to say it. Friend, you have been 4 hours in air that wanted you dead. polite about it, patient about it, but wanting it all the same. And when that door swings in, the whole banked heat of the hut rolls out over you in a wave. Wood smoke and wool and sleeping men and the fire's low breathing. And your body does something on the doorstep that is close to grief and closer to joy. Some shudder from the spine outward that you could not stop if you tried. Nobody laughs at it. Every man in this hut has made that same sound coming off the line. Come in, soldier. Shut the winter out behind you. The man who opened the door is the fisherman, who has the fire tonight. And he had been listening for you, which is why the latch beat your hand. He takes your musket while your fingers are still too wooden to be trusted with it, and stands it in the rack, and points you at the hearth bench. And you sit down in front of the coals and begin the long, careful business of getting your body back. Do it slow. Everything that lasts is slow, the shoemaker said, and it goes for thawing men as much as drying leather. Your hands first, held out to the heat, and the blood coming back into them in pins and wires, aching the way it always aches. A good pain, an honest pain, the pain of a door reopening. Then the boots off, and the weaver's spare socks peeled away, and your feet in the firelight looking like somebody else's feet, white at the toes, and you knead them and flex them and hold them to the coals while the fisherman, unasked, hangs your watch coat on the first peg, the near peg, the warmest one, and moves his own coat outward to make room. The law of the pegs, working for you now. You have been in this hut 1 week, friend, and its laws have quietly taken you in. The hut sleeps around you while you thaw. 11 breaths, and you know them all now. The little catch at the top of the weavers, smoothed out these last nights. Mending, Ezra talking once in his sleep. Of old or two. Nothing. A boy's dream. The sergeant's slow hill of a shoulder rising and falling in the warm corner, above the shelf. Amos's pipe where it has sat all winter, keeping his place. The fire ticks and settles. The wind works along the north wall and finds nothing, because you and 11 other men chinked that wall with your own hands' worth of clay. Some of you in December, one of you tonight, only in the sense that it is yours now too. And that turns out to be enough. And then you turn to climb to your bunk, and you stop, because there is a man in it. It is Cato. He is lying in your bunk, in the cold corner, on top of your blanket, boots on, arms crossed, not asleep, and as you stand there blinking, he swings himself down without a word and nods you toward it, and climbs back up into his own bunk by the fire, and settles, and is breathing slow again inside a minute. And you climb up into your bunk, not understanding. And then you lie down, and then you understand. The bunk is warm. He has been lying in it the better part of half an hour, friend, since the relief drum sounded across the camp, warming your blankets with his own body, so that a man coming off the outer line would not have to climb into frozen bedding at the coldest hour of the night. The planks are warm. The straw is warm. Amos's shape in it warm through and through. There is a place at the small of your back where the heat of another man's body meets the ache the cold left there. And it loosens something in you. And you lie still with your eyes open in the dark, feeling it. Nobody told him to do it. There is no regulation anywhere in this army about it. No order. No custom you were taught at muster. It is a law of the hut, one of the unwritten ones. And it is older than this hut, and older than this army. Friend, soldiers have done this for each other in every cold camp since men first stood watches. The warm spot, the guard's welcome, the small anonymous mercy passed down bunk to bunk, the way Job's all work is passed foot to foot, and the fire's dried wood is passed watch to watch. Somebody did it for Cato once. Some winter, some army camp, some man whose name is gone. Tonight he did it for the new man, the 12th man, the stranger of 1 week who sleeps in a sick farmer's shape in the coldest corner of the hut. And, someday, soldier, and you know this already, lying there warm in the dark. Someday, some other new man will come through that door, off the line, with ice in his eyebrows. And you will already be lying in his bunk. I have shown you a great deal of machinery this winter. Friend, the commissary that failed, and the wagons that stopped, and the Congress that quarreled, and the general writing his patient, furious letters. And I will show you more before spring. But if you want to know, in one image, what actually held the Continental Army together at Valley Forge, through the Firecake weeks, and the fever weeks, and the no-meat nights, it is not in any of the letters. It is here, in a dark hut, past 3 in the morning, in a man lying half an hour in another man's cold bed with his boots on, asking nothing, saying nothing, so that the watch coming in would find it warm. Armies, desert over food. History is full of it. Nobody in history ever deserted a hut like this one while it held. Sleep comes for you fast now, the deep, dreamless kind that follows cold and duty done, and the hut folds its sounds around you. Fire tick and breath and wind foiled at the wall. And the last thing your mind does before it lets go is the small arithmetic it has learned to do in this place. Around the room, bunk be bunk, 11, breathing. And you, the 12th, all present, all warm, let go. Soldier, the fisherman has the fire. Nothing more is asked of you tonight. You wake near dawn to a sound you cannot at first name, and then you name it. It is the door, being closed from the outside, very slowly, by somebody who does not want it heard. You lie still, the grays just coming up in the cracks. The fire is low but alive, so it is nobody's woodpile errand, and the hut around you has the feel of a room in which one other man is also awake and also lying still. And you could not say how you know that. But you know it. You listen. The snow outside the door squeaks once, twice, going away up the company street, unhurried, even steps. A man walking like a man with his mind entirely made up. Then nothing. Then the wind. In the morning, the Irishman's bunk is empty, and his blanket is gone, and his haversack is gone, and his musket, friend, his musket is still in the rack. The hut takes it in with almost no words at all. The sergeant stands a moment looking at the musket left behind, which is its own kind of letter. A man saying, I am no thief. I take nothing of the armies but myself. Ezra starts to say something, and the weaver's hand comes down on his shoulder, and the something goes unsaid. And then, because it is morning in an army, the day simply proceeds. Roll is called, and the orderly sergeant makes a mark in a book. And the mark is one word, and the word is deserted. And I want to stop here. Friend, right at that word. Because you have lived in this hut long enough now to have earned a truthful accounting of it. And the truthful accounting is longer than the mark. Understand first how common the mark is. The books of this army at this camp are stitched through with it. Hundreds upon hundreds of times this winter. Some counts run past 1,000 before spring. Men go in ones, mostly in the dark, like this. Some go toward the enemy, into Philadelphia, where the British pay hard silver for Continental deserters' news. And the hut has words for those men that I will not put in this story. But most, friend, the great most, go the other way. They go home, north up the roads to New England, west into the country, walking by night, hiding from patrols, 100 miles, 200, to a farm somewhere with their name on it. And if you want to understand this winter whole, you must sit with why, and you must do it without sneering, because the men of this hut do not sneer this morning, and they have more right than anybody. Here is what walked out that door with him. 6 months of pay, owed and not paid, and the pay near worthless paper, even when it comes. A wife? The hut knows this much. On a rented patch in the Jerseys with 2 children, and the winter, whose last letter, which he did not read aloud, he read 4 times sitting at the cold end of the hut with his back to the room, and the hut arranged to need things from the far side, all 11 of them, as long as it took, an enlistment that he swore, and maybe believed, was up at the new year, in an army where half the arguments in any hut are about whose enlistment says what, because the states wrote their papers a dozen different ways, and a perfectly sound man's perfectly sound conclusion, after a winter of firecake and fever and no meat nights, that the Congress had broken its side of the bargain first, and that a bargain broken on one side binds nobody. That is the case for the road, friend. And on a February morning in this camp, it is a strong case, and any man who tells you he never once made it to himself in the dark is lying to you or to himself. And either way, you need not listen. And now weigh the other side, because 11 men in this hut heard that same door close and lay still and stayed, and their case is made of heavier and stranger stuff. Some of it is fear. Be honest. The floggings read out at parade, the occasional gallows for the worst cases, though this army hangs few and knows it cannot flog its way to loyalty. Some of it is geography. A Connecticut man is a long way from home, through country thick with loyalists and provost patrols. But the true weights are quieter. There is the shame that has no regulation, the thought of walking up a home lane and planting time, and meeting the eyes of a neighbor whose son stayed. There is the stubborn ember of the cause itself, banked deep under the grievances, the thing none of them talks about directly, and all of them carried here in the first place. There is the spring, always the spring, the animal certainty of men in February, that the world cannot stay like this, that supply must mend, that something is coming. And this camp, friend, though it does not know it yet, is 3 weeks from being proved right about that, in a way none of them would dare predict. And there's the nearest weight of all, the one you learned last night, with the warmth of another man's body at your back. 11 men, the fire rotation with your name in it, the blind division of pork, the all, the pegs, the warm spot. A man can talk himself loose from a Congress. Friend, in one bad night. Talking himself loose from a hut is another matter entirely. The sergeant says, the only eulogy the morning gets, and he says it to the room while pulling on his boots. Not looking up, he stood his watches, he says, and he kept his turns. And he fed this hut off a knife blade once. And whatever the book calls him, this hut will call him by his name. And that is the end of it. No man in this hut informs on the route he guessed, and no man wonders aloud about the wife in the jerseys. And when the boy Ezra, who is 16 and cannot help it, finally asks the question, will they catch him? The sergeant says, without heat, not if he walks the way he shot. And the hut permits itself the ghost of a laugh and grief. Friend, in armies, has always worn exactly that disguise. But I will tell you the part the hut never learns, because this story can follow where the hut cannot. Whether that particular man reached the jerseys, no record says. The records of this winter hold 10,000 stories, with the endings torn out. What the records do say, plainly, in the returns and the books, is the shape of the whole, and the shape is this. This army bled men all winter, by the mark in the book, and by the fever, and by the expiring enlistments, walking away lawful and unblamed, and by every rule of European war, it should have dissolved, as its own commander wrote, dissolved and dispersed, and gone home to its farms, and the war with it, and it did not. The huts held, not every man, friend, never every man, but hut by hut, fire by fire. 11 out of 12, 10 out of 12, the rooms held, all the way to spring, and no historian since. And they have tried for 2 centuries, has ever fully accounted for it on paper, because the accounting was never on paper. You slept in the accounting last night. It kept your bed warm. That evening at supper, the shares are cut 11 ways, and the divider turns his back, and the sergeant points, and the calling of the names goes around the fire, one name shorter than before, and lands, and the hut eats. Outside, the wind is swinging into the south for the first time in a long time, wet and restless. The sound of February, beginning to lose its argument with March. And far down the camp, at the guard posts on the Gulf Road, though no one in this hut knows it yet, there arrived this same week a heavy foreign gentleman in a sleigh, with a greyhound and a French letter of introduction, and a name nobody can pronounce. Hold that thought, friend, and hold your fire's warmth around you tonight. The winter is about to turn, and it turns, of all the strange keys in this story, on a man who cannot ask for bread in English. The news reaches your hut the way all news reaches a hut, second-hand, at supper, improved in the telling. Ezra brings it in with the wood. Breathless, there is a foreign general come to camp. He says, a Prussian, or a German, or some sort of baron, come all the way from the court of the King of Prussia, or possibly France, in a sleigh, with a dog the size of a calf, and he dined with General Washington himself, and he is to inspect the whole army. And here Ezra delivers the crown of the report. He speaks no English at all, not a word. He swears in 3 languages, the teamsters say, and none of them is ours. The hut receives this with the skepticism it applies to all wonders. The fisherman observes that the camp has seen foreign officers before, French mostly. Fine coats and finer opinions come to be made colonels over better men. The weaver asks what earthly use a drill master is to men with no meat, and the sergeant says nothing at all. But the sergeant, you notice, does not dismiss it either. And within the week, the whole camp learns why. Because within the week, the Baron goes to work, and nothing at Valley Forge is ever quite the same again. His name, when the army finally gets its tongue around it, is Baron Friedrich Wilhelm von Steuben, and I will deal honestly with him. Friend, as this story deals honestly with everything, because the truth of the man is better than the legend and stranger too. The letter he carried introduced him as a lieutenant general lately of the King of Prussia's service. The plain fact was leaner. He had been a captain, years back, a staff officer trained in the hardest military school on earth, the army of Frederick the Great, and then let go in the peace. And he had knocked about the courts of Europe since, a soldier without a war, up to his ears in debts and troubles, and the American agents in Paris, who knew exactly what this raw army across the ocean needed and could never afford to hire it honestly, dressed up his rank to get him taken seriously and shipped him over as a volunteer. He came asking no pay unless the cause won. Congress could not have bought a corporal of Frederick's army with the money it did not have. It got for nothing. The one thing money never buys anyway, which is a man looking for the fight that will redeem his whole crooked luck. And this part matters. Friend, so hold it. He came to a starving camp, and he did not sneer. Officers of Europe had visited this army before and gone home with witty letters about the rabble. Von Steuben walked the hut streets in the February slop, looked into the kettles, counted the bare feet, read the returns, and said the thing that American school books would still be quoting 2 centuries on, that no European army could have held together in such conditions, that troops who would stand this for a cause would stand anything. He said it in French, and an aide put it in English, and it went through the camp like a ration of rum, because soldiers can smell contempt through any language ever invented, and there was none in this man. And they knew it before they understood one word. He spoke. Then he did the thing no baron in Europe would have dreamed of doing. He drilled the men himself. Understand what a scandal that is. Friend, in every proper army of the age, a general officer does not handle troops on a parade ground any more than a bishop digs graves. Drill is sergeant's work. Von Steuben looked at this army's sergeants, who had themselves never been properly drilled, teaching 100 different half-remembered systems out of a dozen contradicting books. Massachusetts men wheeling one way and Virginians another. And he concluded that somebody must set the pattern with his own hands, and that the somebody was him. So in the third week of March, on the grand parade, that wide white emptiness you crossed on your way to the outer line, there assembled a picked company, 100 chosen men, drawn from all the brigades, your regiment among those tithed, and the Baron of the armies of Frederick the Great stood out in front of them in the mud with a musket in his own hands. 47 years old, built like a rain barrel, medals on his chest, the great dog Azor sitting behind him like a monument, and began, personally, to teach 100 ragged Continentals how to stand, how to stand. Friend, begin there, as he did, heels so, deuce so, shoulders square, the piece carried thus and not thus. Then how to step, a common step, counted 75 to the minute. Every foot in the company striking the ground on the same beat, a thing this army had simply never uniformly possessed. Then how to wheel, how to form column into line and line into column without the whole mass dissolving into a herd, how to load by the counts, how to come from marching to firing in moments instead of minutes. Nothing in it was secret. It was in books. But an army does not learn from books. It learns from bodies. And here, at last, was the body, out front in the wet, demonstrating the manual of arms himself like the oldest sergeant alive, bawling the commands in French and German with an aide, shouting the English after him, and getting it wrong sometimes. The English aide, so that whole platoons marched earnestly into one another, while the Baron watched his beautiful evolutions collapse into a Pennsylvania traffic jam. And that, friend, is where the swearing comes in. And the swearing deserves its place in this story, because the swearing won the army's heart. He would blow up. The whole parade could see it building, the face going red, the cane beginning to tremble. And then the eruption, a rolling barrage of German oaths, then French oaths, both magnificent, both useless, and then the men waiting for it now, grinning already, the turn to his translator with arms thrown wide, and the plea that went into the letters and memoirs of half the men who heard it. My friend, curse them for me in English, for I cannot make these men understand me in any language I possess. And the parade roared. 100 half-starved men who had buried their messmates all winter stood in the March mud and laughed until they had to be called back to order. And the Baron, who understood soldiers in every language, whether he could speak to them or not, let them laugh, and then squared them away and ran the evolution again. And this time it went better, because men will work themselves into the ground for an instructor who has made them laugh and has never once made them feel small. That is the difference, friend. And the men caught it at once, the way they catch everything. The Baron raged at mistakes and never at men. He drilled his 100, dissolved them back to their brigades as instructors, each one now a seed of the system, and took another 100. And the drill began spreading through the camp the way the fevers had. Hoot to hoot, street to street. Except this contagion ran the other direction, toward order, toward competence, toward something the army had not felt in its body since Germantown, which was the feeling of getting visibly better at its trade every single morning. And at night, while the camp slept, the Baron sat up by candle with his aides and wrote the book, the regulations, chapter by chapter, composed in French because his English was still mostly curses, translated by his young secretary, copied out by hand, brigade by brigade, so that every regiment drilled tomorrow from the identical page. The men would come to call it the Blue Book, and I will tell you now, friend, so you can weigh this winter properly, that the Army of the United States would still be drilling by that book more than 30 years on, through another whole war with Britain. It was written at Valley Forge, at night, by a debt-ridden Prussian captain with an invented rank, a borrowed language, and a genius for the one thing this army lacked, and it outlived every man in this camp. In your hut, the new religion arrives on the boots of the boy. Ezra is among those tithed from the regiment into the second class of 100. Comes back the first evening too tired to eat and too proud to sit down. And now every night after supper, the hut is treated to the manual of arms performed in a space 14 feet by 16. Ezra, with the sergeant's borrowed musket, presenting and shouldering and grounding between the bunks, counting the motions under his breath, and 11 men who have earned the right to jeering him with perfect love. That is not 75 to the minute, boy. That wheel of yours would shame a plow ox. Until one evening, the sergeant himself gets up. The busted sergeant, the man who does not discuss it, and stands beside the boy, and says, "Slow, watch," and does the full manual by the counts, sharp as a blade. 20 years of soldiering coming off him in one silent minute, and the hut goes quiet. And after that, the jeering has a different sound in it. And 2 more men are up of an evening drilling in the aisle. And then 4 feel what is actually happening in this room, friend, because it is the hinge of the whole winter, through the deep cold. These 12 men, élèves, held together by enduring side by side. The fire, the pork, the warm spot, the private laws of one small room against the dark. That was survival. And it was everything. And it was also all there was. What comes into the hut now, on Ezra's counted steps, is the first thing this winter has offered them beyond survival. A common motion, one step, one system, one book. Massachusetts and Virginia and Connecticut striking the ground on the same beat. And the men can feel the difference in their own limbs before any of them finds words for it. The difference between 12 men suffering in a room and 12 men who belong to one instrument. The winter taught them to hold together. The Baron, friend, is teaching them to move together. And in about 3 months, on a scalding day in New Jersey, the distance between those 2 things will decide a battle. And we are getting there. We are getting there. March goes out and April comes in, and the drums own the mornings now. And this chapter, friend, I want you to feel in your legs, because that is where the army felt it every morning, brigade by brigade, The regiments march down to the grand parade, and the drill takes them. And I will not teach you the whole manual. We would be here till Monmouth. But come stand one morning in the ranks, and take the feel of it. Because the feel is the point. The parade ground in late March is mud. Honest Pennsylvania mud. Ankle deep, where 10,000 feet have worked it. And the companies form on it in the raw early light, dressed by the sergeants. And the word comes down the line. And the drums take up the step. And the whole regimental mass leans forward and moves. And it is ragged. The first mornings, be honest about the first mornings. The files bunch and gap. The wheels swing wide. Men trained years apart in different states. Habits fight their own reflexes. And the instructors from the Baron's 100 stalk the flanks correcting. And everything is done over. And done over again. And the mud pulls at every step like the whole past of this disorderly army holding on to its ankles. But drill, friend, is a patient religion, and its miracle is the dullest miracle there is, which is repetition, day upon day, the same evolution, the same counts, the same 75 beats to the minute, rain or shine, and somewhere in the second or third week it begins to happen. And every man who has ever soldiered knows the morning it happens. Though no two of them describe it alike, the company steps off, and the step is simply there, one sound, 100 and some feet, striking the ground as one foot. A deep, single tread you feel come up through your own souls from everybody else's, and the line that all winter was a row of separate cold men becomes, for the length of a wheel, one long creature with one long spine, swinging through the turn like a gate on a good hinge. And a kind of shiver runs the ranks that has nothing to do with the weather. Men grin at it, sideways, under the sergeant's eyes. They cannot help it. The body understands before the mind does. Understands that it has joined something, that the thing it has joined can be relied on, that the man on your left will step where his step belongs, and so the man on his left can, and so on down the line, and down the army. Trust made physical, drummed into the legs, 75 times a minute, 10,000 men deep. The bayonet tells the same story harder. All winter that spike of steel rode every man's belt, and this army's honest use for it. Friend, the whole camp jokes about it now, because the Baron howled about it first, was cooking. A bayonet is a fine skewer. It broils a firecake handsomely. It toasts a scrap of pork over the coals. And that was its service in the war to date, because nobody had ever taught these men its actual trade. And untaught men facing British steel at Brandywine had done what untaught men sensibly do, which is not stay. Now, mornings on the parade, the Baron's system teaches the other trade how to hold the piece for the thrust, how to parry, how to keep the file closed so that the line of points arrives together. And it is awkward, and then less awkward. And then, one April morning, a Connecticut company runs a practice charge across the parade. Points down, one shout, one tread, arriving all at once like a single falling tree. And the instructors nod, and the men walk back to their places, looking at one another with a new thought showing plainly on their faces. The thought is, we could stand now. The next time, it is steel against steel. We could stand, and no man who carried that thought through the retreats of 1777 will ever explain to you what it is worth, because there are no words for it. There is only the difference between the army that left Germantown and the army now forming twice a day on this mud, which is becoming, evolution by evolution, the same men and a different animal. And while the army finds its step, friend, the season turns underneath it, and the two things braid together in the men's bodies until no one can say which is lifting which. It comes gradually, the way hope comes to burnt men, on approval, revocable. The mud first, which is the price of the thaw. The whole camp, a churned brown misery for weeks. And no one complains of it with any conviction, because mud is the sound of the cold surrendering. The creeks unlock and run loud. The first green fires up along the south banks, and men off duty walk out just to look at it. Grown soldiers standing in a row studying grass. The sick lists, which climbed all through the late winter as the accumulated miseries came due. And I told you, friend, that the dying at this camp ran heaviest, not in the deep cold, but in the spring that followed it. The sick lists crest and hold, and then at last begin to come down, week upon week, the surgeons hardly trusting their own returns. Supply mends, not by magic, but by men. A new quartermaster general, the fighting General Green, dragooned into the job against every wish he had, who attacks the wagon problem the way he attacks everything. And the roads dry, and the trains begin to arrive, and there is meat now more days than not, and shoes coming up the roads by the barrel. And one evening in April, the shares come off the board in this hut, and every single portion has meat in it. And the divider turns his back, and the sergeant points, and the old blind ceremony proceeds exactly as ever, because fat times, or lean, friend, the hut does not amend its laws, and the river gives its gift. The shad come up the Schuylkill on their spring run, as they come every spring of the world, silver and uncountable, and the camp goes down to meet them with seines and baskets and bare hands, and there are fish frying on 1,000 fires for days, and the men tell it ever after as a wonder. The year the river fed the army. I will deal square with you, friend. As always, the wonder grew in the telling, the way the lone tree grew taller in another town's telling, and the records of the commissaries are quieter about the shad than the memoirs are. But the run was real, and the fish were real, and an army that has eaten firecake since Christmas may be forgiven for remembering its first fresh fish as roughly the size of a miracle. And this story will not take it from them. In the hut, the evening drill in the aisle has become the evening entertainment, and the roles have quietly reversed, for Ezra is now the instructor, 16 years old, correcting men twice his age, on the count of the second motion of loading with the terrible pedantry of the newly converted. And the men take it from him. Friend, that is the beautiful part. Cato and the fisherman and the weaver standing in a file between the bunks being drilled by a boy, because the system is the system no matter whose mouth it comes out of, And everyone in this army has finally agreed to belong to one system. And that agreement, more than any single thing the winter did, is what they will carry out of this valley. Some evenings now, with the door standing open to the mild air, you can hear it all going at once, friend, and it makes a sound the winter never made. Drums down on the parade beating retreat, and a fife over it, in tune, mostly, the fresh fires snapping under fish. Somewhere up the street, a company singing, actually singing, the Baron's step having put music back into feet that shuffled all winter, and under it all, steady as ever, the axes still ringing somewhere on the hillsides. Because a camp this size eats wood in every season, and some things at Valley Forge never change at all. The sergeant stands in the doorway one such evening listening, a long time, saying nothing, and then he says it, half to the dusk, in the voice of a man rendering a professional judgment he has withheld for months. They came in here, a mob, he says. They will go out an army, and away to the southeast. Friend, where the glow of Philadelphia sits on the horizon the same as ever. The men who own that glow have begun to hear reports of the drumming on this side of the hills. Every morning, every evening, regular as a heartbeat, and to wonder, in their ballrooms, what exactly is being built out there in the mud. They will find out on the 19th of June. But before that, before any of it, there is a piece of news coming up the York Road this very week that is going to set this whole camp cheering and firing cannon for joy. And it comes, of all places, from France. 2 more chapters of winter's story left, friend, and the next one is the happiest morning this army has ever had. Rest well. You have earned the good part. The news comes up the York Road at the end of April, and it comes the way the biggest news always comes. Friend, in pieces, sideways, ahead of itself. A teamster hears it at a tavern and swears to it. An officer's letter hints at it. The camp passes it hand to hand all week, like a coin everybody suspects is false, because this army has been burned by good rumors before. And the rumor this time is so large that believing it feels like a risk no sensible man should take. And then the express riders come in with the official packets, and headquarters confirms it. And it is true. And on the 5th of May, it is read out in general orders to the whole army. And I want you to hear it the way the camp heard it. Plain. Because plainness is what made men's ears ring. France has recognized the independence of the United States. France has signed a treaty of alliance. The King of France, the oldest and largest military power in Europe, is entering the war on the American side, with his fleets and his armies and his treasury, against Britain. Now, friend, stand in the hut street with the others while it sinks in, and let it sink all the way. Because for the men of this camp, the news is not a paragraph of diplomacy, it is arithmetic. And they do the arithmetic where they stand. Since the shooting began, this has been 13 quarrelsome colonies against the greatest empire on earth, alone, unrecognized by a single nation, a rebellion that the world was politely waiting to watch hang. That is what these men have carried through every retreat and every Firecake week. The aloneness, the possibility that the whole thing was a fire that would simply burn out unwitnessed. And now the oldest kingdom in Europe has looked at this cause, at this army, at these very hills, and placed its bet. Britain must now guard its home waters, its sugar islands, its stations across the whole world against the French fleet. The war has gone from a colonial police action to a world war overnight. And every private soldier in this mud understands in 1 minute what that means for the odds, and understands one thing more, the thing that straightens backs all down the street. The French did not sign because of the Congress's eloquence. They signed because of Saratoga, because of Germantown, where this beaten army turned and attacked, because these ragged regiments had proved the bet was live. The men of Valley Forge did not receive the alliance. Friend, they earned it, and they know it, and headquarters knows they know it, and that is why the next day happens, because Washington orders a celebration, and the celebration is the 6th of May, and the 6th of May, friend, is the graduation day of everything this story has shown you. It begins with the chaplains at 9, Thanksgiving services, brigade by brigade, and then the signal gun, and the whole army turns out under arms and marches to the grand parade. 10,000 men and more, formed in 2 long lines by brigades. And here is the first wonder of the day, quietly noted by every officer present. The forming itself. In December, this maneuver, arraying an entire army in precise double battle lines, would have consumed half a day and dissolved twice into a herd. On this May morning, the brigades come onto the ground by the Baron's system, column into line, wheel, and dress, and the army assembles itself like a good lock closing in minutes, and the Baron rides the lines inspecting, and what he sees bears his inspection. And men stand a little differently who know they bear inspection. And then, the feu de joie. And I will slow down here, friend, because you may never have heard of this thing. And it was the most beautiful noise anyone on that field ever heard. Feu de joie, fire of joy. An old salute of the armies of Europe. And it works like this. The cannon speak first. A 13-gun salute, 1 for each state, rolling off the artillery park slow and enormous. And then the infantry fire, but not in a volley. 1 man fires, and then his neighbor, and then his, each musket answering the last, a running fire that starts at the right of the front line and sprints man by man down the whole line to the left, leaps to the second line, and runs all the way back up the other way. A single ribbon of flame and sound a mile long and 2 lines deep. 10,000 muskets, firing 1 at a time in perfect sequence. So fast it sounds like one endless tearing peal. The fire of joy running along the army like a lit fuse. Understand what you are hearing, friend, and what every officer on that field heard. A feu de joie is not a show of force. It is a show of discipline, the most merciless one there is. 10,000 nervous fingers, and the whole effect ruined if any dozen of them fire early or late or together. An army cannot fake a good feu de joie. It can only be trained into one, motion by motion, count by count, 75 beats to the minute. all through a cold spring on a muddy parade, when that running fire went down the lines at Valley Forge clean. And it went clean. The accounts agree. Again and again. 3 rounds of cannon and 3 runnings of the ribbon. What the army was really firing off was the proof of its own transformation, and every man in the ranks could hear it working. His own single shot landing exactly in its place in the long sentence. 1 word in 10,000 words, all spoken in order. And, between the rounds, the whole field huzz ahead together on command. Long live the King of France. Long live the friendly European powers. Huzzah for the American states, and the hills threw it back. You are in that line. Friend, your musket speaks its 1 word in its place. And I will tell you what the men around you are doing between rounds. Because the letters and diaries of that day all tell it the same. They are grinning at each other like boys. The sergeant, the busted sergeant, on your files right, grinning, Cato reloading by the counts, with his eyes shining. Ezra, so proud of his army that he appears to be in some physical difficulty. The winter is standing in these lines too. Friend, every ounce of it. The firecake, and the fevers, and the empty bunks, and the marks in the books. And for one morning, the whole of it has been gathered up and answered. 13 guns and a mile of running fire. And there is not a man on the parade who does not feel the answer land. Afterward comes the part the private soldiers will talk about longest. Of course, a gill of rum to every man, by order, and the officers dine all together in the open air. Hundreds of them at one vast spread of tables, with the general and his lady moving among them. And there are toasts and music, and the accounts say, Washington, that grave and careful man, was seen this day to smile openly and often, and even to join a game of cricket with the younger officers on the green. And the army watching from its streets takes as much nourishment from that sight as from the rum, because a commander at play means a commander, for one afternoon, unafraid. And 18 miles away, friend, the other army hears it all. The 13-gun salutes carry in May air, and the running fire carries. And the British in Philadelphia know by that evening exactly what is being celebrated on the hills, because they have known about the French treaty longer than the Americans have, and it has changed everything for them too, and none of it in their favor. Orders are already moving across the Atlantic. Philadelphia, the prize of last autumn's whole campaign, is now a luxury. Britain cannot garrison in a world war, and the army in its ballrooms has begun, very quietly, to pack. The men on the grand parade do not know that yet, but some of them, watching the southeast horizon that evening, notice that they no longer think of the glow down there of the old way, the hungry way, and could not say just when that changed. That night, your hut sits late around its fire with the rum warm in it, and there is singing up and down the company street, real singing, and the fisherman is made to do all 13 toasts over again in miniature, and the hut drinks the King of France's health in creek water and means it, and it is the first night since you came through that door, friend, that the talk around this fire is all of the future and none of it of food. Enjoy it with them. They are owed it. The winter is over. The alliance is signed. The army is made, and there is only one thing left for this valley to give them now, which is the order to leave it. And that order is 6 weeks out and riding closer. The last night in the hut is coming. Friend, let us make it a good one. The order, when it finally comes the way the hut always said it would. In the middle of something else. It is the 18th of June, 1778. Full green summer in the valley now. The hillsides that the army skinned for timber gone soft with new growth. And the news has been building for days like weather. The British are leaving Philadelphia. It is not rumor this time. It is deserters and market folk, and then the army's own patrols, all saying the same thing. The wagons, the loading, the transports dropping down the river. And this very morning, the word comes hard and confirmed. They are out. The whole British Army has crossed into New Jersey and is marching overland for New York. And the capital of the United States stands empty. And one American brigade is already on the road to occupy it. And on the heels of that word comes the other word, the one this whole city of huts has been waiting for without saying so. Read out by the orderly sergeants, street by street in the June morning. The army marches tomorrow. The army marches after them. So this is the last night, friend. And the hut knows it. And I have brought you the whole way through this winter so you could stand in this room tonight and feel what these men feel, which is every possible thing at once. The packing is quickly done. That is the first strange mercy of the evening. How little there is to pack. A soldier's whole estate still fits in a haversack and a blanket roll. Same as the day you stood in the snow outside that door, except that everything in the roll is sounder now than it was then. The shoes double-stitched by Job's own hand this very week, on his rounds, for he has gone down the whole line of the hut's feet one final time like a farrier before a long haul. The shirts faced and mended by a woman in a brown cloak, whose name this story promised to remember. The cartridge boxes full. The muskets, by the Baron's law, clean as Marsh's scalpels ever were. The army that could not clothe itself in December walks out of this valley tomorrow equipped, and every man packing tonight handles his own gear with a kind of puzzled respect, as if it belonged to some richer soldier he has not yet been introduced to. And then the packing is done, and the evening is long, June long, and the hut does what people do on last nights everywhere. Friend, it sits up late, and it looks at things. It looks at the walls. The clay chinking is half gone now, crumbled out through the spring rain. And nobody has patched it in weeks, because summer was coming, and everyone knew this night was coming. And through the gaps, the mild dark comes in freely, where the wind used to come killing. The smoke of a whole winter has blacked the underside of the roof and cured the log walls to the color of a pipe bowl. And on the wall by the door, cut with a knife point in the idle evenings of February, there are initials and dates, and a crude Connecticut pine tree, and one long tally of Firecake days that somebody kept until somebody else made him stop. The boy Ezra walks the room slow with the candle stub, reading the walls like a book, and he is memorizing it. Friend, you can watch him do it. 16 years old, and wise enough already to know that he is standing somewhere he will tell about for the rest of his life. It looks at the hearth, cold now, swept, the first cold hearth this room has known since December, because the June night wants no fire, and the rotation is ended. The long, unbroken chain of watches, 180 some nights, of somebody always awake, somebody always feeding it, run out at last, this morning, in a bed of grey ash. The andiron stones sit scorched and faithful, above, on the shelf. The sergeant has packed his kit, complete, except for one item, and he takes it down now. And the hut goes quiet, because it is Amos's pipe, and here, friend, is the news I have kept for this night, where the hut kept it. Amos of Litchfield did not die. He is one of the ones the spring gave back, off the returns and out of the fever ward in the last week of May. 20 pounds lighter and grey at the temples that were brown at Christmas, and sent to finish mending with the invalid company down the line. And this evening, on the last night, the sergeant and Cato walk down through the June dusk and bring him back to the hut for an hour. And he sits on the bench by his old bunk, your bunk, and the hut fills the pipe for him with tobacco bought against this exact occasion by the blind division of one final luxury, 12 ways. And he smokes it slow, and looks around the smoke-blacked room at the faces, and says, "Well, boys, I see you kept my bunk warm, and you, friend, the man who slept all winter in the shape of him, you say, warmer than you know." And the hut laughs, and it is a laugh with a whole winter inside it. But this story pays every account it opens, and it will not pretend the evening owed nothing. 12 men built this hut in December, and of the 12, there are 8 in this room tonight. Amos mending, and the Irishman gone into the dark of a February morning to whatever end his own legs found him. And 2 more, friend, 2 more of the original 12 went down the company street on blankets in the cold and did not come back. The weaver's predecessor, and a quiet Danbury man you never met, dead of the fever in the crowded wards, before you ever came through the door. 2 names on the long list of near 2,000 that this camp will carry forever. Men who died for their country in a war without ever hearing the enemy's guns. And on the last night, the hut speaks their names plainly. Once, the sergeant raising his creek water in the candlelight, and the room drinks to them standing, and sets the cups down, and that is the whole ceremony. And it is enough, because it is honest, and they were soldiers. And soldiers are owed the truth more than they are owed tears. Late, very late, with the candle down to a thumbnail, the talk finally runs dry, and the men turn in on their bunks one last time, and you climb up into yours, into the warm, familiar shape in the straw that was a stranger's shape in February, and is simply yours now. And you lie there in the mild dark, listening to the hut around you. And it comes to you slowly, the way true things come at night. What this room actually was. You came to it as the 12th man, a name on a clerk's slip, assigned to a cold corner among strangers. The room taught you its laws, the fire and the pegs and the blind knife, and fed you off a blade's edge of salt, and mended your shoes and your coat, and warmed your bed with its own body when you came off the line, and counted your breathing in the dark as you learned to count everyone else's, and stood between you and the winter with nothing but clay, and wood, and rules, and each other. 14 feet by 16. You will sleep in finer rooms if you live, friend, and you will never sleep in a greater one. Tomorrow the drums beat at first light, and the brigades form on the streets of the city they built, and the army marches east into New Jersey after the enemy. By the common step, 75 to the minute. 10,000 feet, striking the summer road on one beat. An army, at last, going out to prove it. And 10 days on, at a crossroads called Monmouth Courthouse, in heat that will kill men in the ranks where the cold never could, this army will meet the British rear guard, and the line will waver once the old way, and then the drill will take hold, and the regiments of Valley Forge will form under fire, wheel under fire, stand and volley, and hold their ground through the longest, hottest day of the whole war. And when the sun goes down, the British will be the ones who slip away in the dark, and the men in the American line, your men, friend, will sleep on their arms on the field they held, which is a thing this army has never once done before. And every soldier lying on that field will know exactly which valley taught them how. But that is tomorrow's road. Tonight is the last watch, and there is nothing left to guard against, and no fire to keep. And the door stands open to the June air, and through it, all down the company street, you can hear the city of huts settling into its final sleep. Low voices, a fiddle far off, the creek running loud with summer. Sleep now, soldier. You came to this valley looking for a roof, and you are leaving it knowing how to stand in a line, and how to keep a fire, and how to divide almost nothing 12 honest ways, and how much a plain man can carry when the men beside him are carrying it too. The hut stays, the army goes, and which of those two facts matters more? Friend, the last chapter of this story is going to show you. The drums beat at first light on the 19th of June, and the city of huts empties itself the way it filled. All at once, and in order, stand with me one last time on the high ground, friend, where we stood in December listening to the axes, and watch it go. The brigades form on their streets in the young sun, and the streets pour their men onto the roads, column after column, and the columns flow east toward the Schuylkill crossings with the wagons rumbling after. And the sound this army makes, leaving, is nothing like the sound it made arriving. There is no shuffle in it. There is one deep, steady tread, 75 to the minute, thousands of feet on one beat, and drums, and a fife somewhere throwing a tune up into the morning like a bird. And here and there, along the moving files, a company is singing. 6 months ago, this same road heard an army that could barely lift its feet. Listen to it now, friend. That is the same army. That is the whole story of this valley. Told in footsteps, your hut watches them go. Let us stay with it, you and I, while the columns shrink eastward and the dust settles on the empty roads, because the hut story does not end this morning, and the end of it is worth the staying. By noon, the valley is quiet. In a way, it has not been quiet since the 18th of December. 1,500 huts stand empty on the hillsides, doors hanging open to the summer air, and the quiet walks through all of them at once. In yours, the light comes in through the gaps where the clay has crumbled and lies in long yellow bars across the floor, across the swept hearth, across the bunks with their pressed straw shapes. 8 shapes now that will never be lain in again, and the initials by the door, and the tally of Firecake days, and 1 pipe's worth of ash on the bench where a mended man sat smoking among his friends last night. Nobody in all history will ever sleep in this room again. Friend, its whole life as a home was 180 some days, and in those days it did everything a home has ever done for anybody. And now that work is finished, and the summer moves in through the open door and begins, very slowly, taking the hut back. It goes the way all abandoned things go. Patiently, the local farmers come first. That same year, and who can blame them? For the army skinned their woodlots bare, building this city. And now the city stands empty and seasoned. And hut by hut the timbers go home in wagons to become barns and fences and firewood. The valley quietly digesting the winter that happened to it. What the farmers do not take, the weather does. Roofs fall in under snows that no fire watch answers. The clay chimneys slump into mounds. Brush comes up in the company streets. Then saplings. Then trees. And the earthworks on the outer line soften year by year into long green swells that sheep graze over. And by the time the men who wintered here are old men, a visitor to these hills would need one of them along to point out where anything had been, and the old men do come back. Friend, that is on the record. Gray veterans walking the ground with their grandchildren, hunting the line of a vanished street, and standing a long while at some low grassy hummock that the child sees is nothing at all, and the old man sees is a hearth, because the men remembered, even as the ground forgot, and the country remembered with them, more and more as the years ran, until the remembering itself became a kind of building. A century after the winter, the people of a grown and reunited nation began to gather this ground in and keep it, and raise the fallen story back up. They found the old stone house by the creek still standing, the little house where the candle burned past 2 in the morning, and they kept it as it was. They traced the camps and the works, and in time, friend, they did the thing I love best in this whole long afterward. They built the huts again. Out on those hillsides, today stand rows of log huts, 14 feet by 16, clay chinked, board doored, raised by careful hands from the Army's own specifications, from the General's own orders of December 1777, so that a family from anywhere can duck through a low door 2.5 centuries on and stand in the smoke-smelling dark and see the bunks and the hearth and the size of it and feel what you felt on your first night. Friend, which is how small a room can be and still hold everything. And they come, the families. That is the last fact of this story, and I have saved it for the end because it answers the question the whole story has been asking. Millions of them, year upon year, to a stretch of Pennsylvania farm hills, where, as every guide and every marker will tell them plainly, no battle was ever fought, not one. There is no other famous field in America like it. Friend, men make pilgrimages to Lexington for a fight, to Gettysburg for a fight, and they make them to Valley Forge for a winter. They come to see the place where an army was cold and hungry and sick and stayed, where 12 men to a room kept one fire alive in turns, and divided almost nothing, with their backs turned and their eyes shut, and warmed each other's beds, and buried their dead without drums, and drilled in the mud until 13 quarrels learned one step. The nation that grew up out of that step seems to understand, without ever quite saying it, that this ground holds its true beginning, that the fighting proved the cause had teeth, but this valley proved it had a heart that could outlast a winter, and a country is its heart. Friend, in the end, the rest is weather. So now the story is told, and the fire is low, and it is time. You are not in the hut anymore. Friend, you are home, in your own bed, in your own warm room. With a winter of 1777, 2.5 centuries gone, and every soul in this story long at rest. Amos and the sergeant, Job and his all, Cato, Ezra, who told it all to his grandchildren just as we knew he would, Mrs. Meade of the split knuckles, the Baron and his great dog, the tall man in the gray coat who asked about your shoes, all of them done with their watches now, every one sleeping sound in the same American ground they wintered on, and their fire, the one they kept alive in turns through the dark of that winter. They passed it on, hand to hand down the years, the way the dried wood was passed, watch to watch. And it has come all this way, friend, and tonight it is yours. It is the warmth of the room you are lying in. It is the peace of a door no enemy watches, and a night no drum will break, and a lamp you may put out whenever you please, because nobody has to sit up, and nothing is coming. And the whole long watch was kept, all of it, so that this bed of yours could stand in a free and quiet country with nothing outside the window but the ordinary dark. The hut would want you to have it. Take the warm spot. Soldier, you are the relief they were waiting for. Bank your fire low now. Let the wind walk on by. The watch is ended. The camp is sleeping. Sleep now. Sweet dreams.